Welcome, everybody. I am glad to be here with you all tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. A lot is going on. I'm glad to be here. So let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. March 8th is International Working Women's Day. It is recognized by the United Nations. It's originally a Marxist holiday created by the Socialist International. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I do want to welcome you all. And yes, we are having yet another late night conversation. This will follow the format that we always use on this channel. First, I will give my opening remarks. Tonight, we got another slideshow for you called How to Stay on the Revolutionary Road. We'll do the opening remarks. Then from there, I will answer your super chat or Rumble Rant questions in the second half of the show. But before we do that, we have a roll call to find out who's watching, who's on the other side of the camera. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, send a Rumble Rant or a super chat. Rumble Rants are on the Rumble. Super chats are on YouTube. And those are the best ways to get me to answer your questions in the second half of the program. Announcements. The Center for Political Innovation is on fire right now. I don't know if you were aware, but a lot of amazing things are happening. We had our national general membership call. We have an active local now in Minneapolis. We have an active local now in Chicago, and we have an active local now in Los Angeles. We are expanding, all heading to the big event coming up this summer, which is our national convention, which is set to take place July 12th, 2025 at the Midwest Conference Center, very close to the Chicago O'Hare Airport. We are starting to rev up for the months of work it will take to put on a major anti-imperialist rally in Chicago on July 12th. And it's not going to be easy, but we are going to fill up that auditorium. There will be well over 400 people that will attend this event, and we're very, very excited. So mark your calendar. If there's one event that you go to this year, this is the one. Book your flight, book your transportation. We are doing it. This will be the anti-imperialist event of the year. Working families first, defeat the deep state, embrace a new world of peace and innovation. See you in Chicago. The link down below to register. It's going to be absolutely awesome. And generally, when we have a convention, we have a number of people who come into town to help out with it. Well, this year we decided to formalize that. So we have decided to have a 7-day program from a drop to an ocean. From July 9th to July 16th, we will have a 7-day course that will involve facilitating the convention, putting on the convention. At the end of the course, we'll have a graduation ceremony, and people who complete the course will become accredited innovationists. So while the convention happens, during the convention, we're having the 7-day workshop. And so that's going to be very exciting. If you would like to become an accredited innovationist, if you want to really integrate yourself with the organization and what we do this summer and want to help convene the convention, put it on, by all means, come to the 7-day workshop. That's going to be important. And on top of that, April 19th, next month, I'm headed to Los Angeles for yet another workshop. Do you believe in growth? A new day for Los Angeles, a new day for America. So if you're a Cali-based person, be there. There's people that are coming down from mid-central California. There are people, I'm flying there. It looks like it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great day in California. A small workshop at a house, intimate classes, discussion, get to know the organization, get to eat good food, listen to good music. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So see you in Los Angeles. So on that note, the way we do things here, first I give my opening remarks, then from there we do the roll call, and then I answer your questions. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our show, by all means, send me a Rumble rant or a super chat. Super chats are on YouTube. Rumble rants are on Rumble. The second half of the show is all me answering your questions. So make the second half of the show entertaining. Send a question, send a comment, send something you want me to react to. Think of something fun you'd like me to do in the second half of the show, and send me a super chat in order to do it. Now, we do have a slideshow for tonight, but before we get to the slideshow tonight, we would like to just touch on two items. The first of which is rather pleasant. The second of which is rather unpleasant. So the fun part first, International Women's Day is today. March 8th is International Women's Day, originally International Working Women's Day. It was a holiday created by the Second International, which was a international body of socialist groups in the early 1900s. It was related to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, where women were burned in New York City. They were locked in, they couldn't get out. And it was to commemorate the struggles of working women for justice on the job, etc. And in communist countries, it was a national holiday in which women were given flowers. And then the UN made it International Women's Day, and now it's just a general holiday. However, in Russia, because Russia was once the Soviet Union, International Women's Day is a really, really important cultural event. And that's when you get flowers for all of your female coworkers. It's a very important day. And so the Russian military that is on the front lines battling against the imperialists and fighting to defend the peoples of Donbass from the NATO regime and all of that, the Russian military in the middle of the war decided to make a video for International Women's Day. And so I just thought, as a gesture of solidarity with the Russians and with the peoples of the Donbass and the peoples of the whole world in their struggle against imperialism, I would show the Russian army video, the greeting that was made by the Russian military for International Women's Day. So here we are.
Любимые девушки, женщины, сестры, мамы, жены, дочери. Хотим вас поздравить с наступающим 8 марта. Пожелать вам здоровья, оставаться всегда красивыми, жизнерадостными, любимыми и любящими всегда и везде.
Наши мамы, сестры, жены, поздравляем вас от лица 1-го танка армии с 8 марта.
Желаю всем счастья, здоровья, любви.
Оставаться такими же красивыми, да, и дожидаться, соответственно, нас.
Благодаря вашей поддержке, любви и заботе мы здесь, справляемся с боевой задачей.
Вы наша поддержка, наша опора.
Всех с праздником. В особенности маму, бабушку. Всех с 8 марта.
Отдельно хотел бы поздравить свою жену, мать, сестру, тещу. Всех с праздником.
Я желаю вам, чтобы каждая из вас дождалась своего героя, и все у вас было замечательно и хорошо.
Мы до конца с полной уверенностью и надежностью будем стоять здесь, на защите нашей Родины. Спасибо вам, наши любимые дамы.
С праздником, дорогие женщины! С 8 марта!
Любим вас. Победа будет за нами.
All right. So that was the Russian military greeting the women of Russia and thanking them for their support in this special military operation. And we are really hoping that that war will be ended soon. Now, we understand that Donald Trump has cut off all U.S. aid to Ukraine. We understand that there are negotiations happening in Istanbul, and we're hoping for that war to be over soon. And it is really great that the Russian military could make that video greeting the women of Russia. We stand with the women of Russia. We stand with the Russian military against the imperialists. The next item that I'm just going to touch on briefly is that there are, and I'll be talking about this in future streams in much more detail. Tonight I have the slideshow, but we'll be talking about this. Have no fear. The Syrian Arab Republic, the socialist government of Syria, Ba'athist Arab socialism, that government has been overthrown, and there is now a pro-imperialist Islamist government that's been put into power in Syria. And one of the leaders of it, in fact, the president of Syria, is a terrorist, a man who danced and celebrated 9/11, was part of the Osama bin Laden al-Qaeda network, and he's now the president. And this is absolutely horrendous to have a al-Qaeda terrorist running the government of Syria, to have a socialist government overthrown. The Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, is in exile, and the Syrian people are now living under this Islamic extremist government led by an al-Qaeda terrorist. Now, what has just started happening is they are now massacring religious minorities in Syria. Christians and Alawites, who are the two major religious minorities in Syria, are now being executed in mass. Yesterday, 750 Alawites were slaughtered, and Christians are also being killed. I don't have exactly the numbers, but there are retaliatory massacres being carried out against religious minorities in Syria. It is absolutely horrendous. And I am particularly not happy about this and outraged about it because I warned the world about this. This is me at the U.S. State Department in 2016, speaking to State Department spokesperson John Kirby. And this is me in the video. This is me almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I talked about what the potential consequences for the Syrian government falling would be.
Yeah.
Would the violent toppling of the Syrian government directly benefit ISIS?
The toppling of the Assad government benefit ISIS?
That would be directly to the benefit of ISIS.
Look, I'm not going to speculate about what would or what wouldn't benefit Daesh. I mean, to some degree, and the secretary's talked about this, there's a symbiosis between the Assad regime and Daesh, and he said that many, many times. It is through Assad's brutality that Daesh has been able to fester and grow into ungoverned spaces. And one of the things that we've talked about routinely, although we haven't said it, we haven't talked about it recently, is that we understand that while the future of Syria cannot include Bashar al-Assad, as we work through this political process to a transitional governing body, we recognize that some institutions of government, for instance, the security forces, in some form or fashion, has got to stay intact, so that there isn't a complete collapse of an appropriate governing infrastructure inside the country as we work through this very difficult transitional process.
If the Syrian government were to just immediately fall, what would happen to Syrian Christians? What would happen to Syrian Alawites?
Look, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals about a situation that we're actually obviously trying to avoid. It isn't about the fall of the regime. We are trying to get to a transitional process of governance that preserves even some of the existing infrastructure going forward, but that at the end of that process gets us to a government that is put in place by the Syrian people with their voices being heard, and it doesn't include Bashar al-Assad.
I specifically asked him, you can watch, I specifically said, what would happen to Syrian Christians? What would happen to Syrian Alawites? Because anyone could see that they would be massacred if the Syrian Arab Republic was overthrown.
It's a very difficult transitional process.
If the Syrian government were to just immediately fall, what would happen to Syrian Christians? What would happen to Syrian Alawites?
Look, I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals about a situation that...
It's not a hypothetical. The Syrian Arab Republic has fallen, and those people are now being killed. And I was there before the whole world confronting the U.S. State Department about it, warning people that this would happen. we'll be talking more about that in future streams. I don't want to dwell on that tonight because it is very horrendous what is happening in Syria. And I'm very happy that we have a director of national intelligence, a top spy in America, Tulsi Gabbard, who also spoke up at the same time that I was speaking up and said the same thing. And I'm hoping that Donald Trump and his administration will take action against the Syrian government that was installed by globalism, imperialism, and I hope that Christians and Alawites in Syria can be further protected, and that the government, the illegitimate government of Syria that is murdering the Syrian people, the Syrian Christians and the Alawites, can be removed. And I hope that Syria can return to having an anti-imperialist government. I understand there is an uprising now in Syria as a result of these killings, that there are a number of people that want to overthrow the current government, there is now civil war again. So, not a good time for Syria, but this new regime, this victory of regime change in Syria has brought a murderous terrorist regime into existence. And we'll talk about that more later. However, all of this, the Russians fighting for the peoples of Donbass, the Syrian people suffering in the aftermath of the overthrow of their anti-imperialist government, all of this points to how important it is to build a revolutionary organization in the United States. And building a revolutionary organization in these times, building an organization of people that are willing to fight for a government of action that will fight for working families, building an organization that will oppose the danger of a new world war and oppose the emerging low-wage police state is not an easy thing to do. It's very difficult, but we do it. And we have a growing organization right now. CPI is growing. We have 3 functioning locals. We've got people joining us. I hope that you will become a member right now. If you join, your first month of membership is free. After that, we will begin charging you $15 a month. Not much. But I hope you will sign up and become a member. And building a revolutionary movement is not just difficult on the mass scale. It is also difficult on the individual and personal scale for reasons that we're going to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're going to have a conversation about how to stay on the revolutionary road. So here we go. How to stay on the revolutionary road. How are humans different from animals? What is it that separates human beings from animals? Well, according to Frederick Engels, all planned action of animals has never succeeded in impressing the stamp of their will upon the earth. That was left for man. In short, the animal merely uses its environment and brings about changes in it simply by its presence. Man, by his changes, makes it serve his end and masters it. And this is the final distinction between man and other animals. And once again, it is labor that brings about this distinction. Human beings force our will onto the world around us. We are creative. We are innovators. We take the world around us and we force it to serve us. And we don't simply interact with it like animals interact with their ecosystem. We force the world around to change. We improve the world around us. We are creative. We are a creative species. That's what defines us. And that is why we are innovationists. We celebrate this beautiful aspect of the human species. And that we understand that the whole history of human civilization is human beings reinventing how it is they force the environment to serve them, reinventing their relationship with nature, and doing so in a more efficient way to increase the population, to increase living standards, to make life more comfortable, to increase the life expectancy. And that first we were hunter-gatherers. Then from there, we moved toward domesticating animals, and we had slavery. Then from there, we had feudalism. And then from there, we had capitalism. And then capitalism moved into the stage of imperialism, globalism, or the monopolistic system that we live under now. And that ultimately, to overturn and defeat globalism, imperialism, we need to give birth to innovationism, a system where with a planned economy, with a government of action, we can unleash human growth to even higher levels. By getting rid of the irrationality of profits in command, we can allow human growth and creativity and innovation to soar to even greater heights and eventually build a world with wealth and abundance for all, in which poverty is eradicated, in which people can live a comfortable life and live and just do what they feel like doing, from each according to their own ability, to each according to their needs. A society where there is so much abundance of wealth and there is so much technological advancement that people only really have to work because they feel like it. A society where there's really no inequality because there's enough for everybody. A society in which there's really no need for a government because there's no need for coercion. We want to unleash human creative power to reach a higher plane. And that ultimate higher plane is innovationism. And the ideology that understands this trajectory is called innovationism. And we at the Center for Political Innovation, we are innovationists. Now, the system that we currently live under is called imperialism, globalism. And there are three ways to understand this system. The first is when Henry Charles Carey, he wrote about the American system versus the English system. And he described the monopolistic practices of the British Empire that were holding back development and impoverishing people around the world in order to enrich the London Stock Exchange. And he argued that the American Revolution, the theories of Alexander Hamilton and others that favored economic development, were the opposite. And Henry Charles Carey wrote about the English system versus the American system. Later, Vladimir Lenin talked about imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and talked about how bankers were becoming dominant over industrialists. He talked about how the export of capital was becoming primary and how there was an international financial oligarchy that was emerging, and it was keeping countries impoverished and holding back development around the world. They were carving up the world, carving out the world with what they call territorial partition. And that as a result of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, that Africa, Asia, and Latin America were being impoverished, and that war was breaking out as a way of redividing the world among the imperialists, etc. So Lenin had his concept of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Now, increasingly around the world, there's talk of geopolitics. And geopolitics talks about how geography and the nature of the land and our relationship with geographic formations affects our politics. And in Russia, Alexander Dugin, who is a geopolitical thinker, has talked about the history of Atlanticism, or civilizations of the sea, and Eurasianism, civilizations of the land, and how civilizations of the sea build up mighty militaries and navies, and they seek to control trade routes, and they build highly individualistic and highly militaristic societies. They hold back development, and they plunder, loot, and they concentrate it in one mighty city. The Roman Empire was a great example of this, and the British Empire and the modern Western imperialist financial system are Atlanticism, civilization of the sea. Whereas civilizations of the land, empires and societies that are formed on great land masses, develop in a different way. And the history of Chinese civilization, which is mostly on the land, is different because you have different regions that are connected, and the way they are held together is through developing together. And that's why China invented the world's first civil service examination. And that's why, China developed a language to connect the peoples of all the different regions, Mandarin. And you can talk about in Russia, the history of Russia. Watch the movie Ivan the Terrible, and you'll learn about a czar who unified all the peoples of the Russian Empire. And as a result, was able to increase their living standards and raise the people up. And you can talk about this with the history of the Persian Empire. that there are many examples of civilization of the sea and civilization of the land, and that civilizations of the land tend to have a more collectivist way of being, and they tend to encourage development as a way of holding great regions and nationalities and tribes and religious groups together. They must find common economic interest in order to stay together, whereas Atlanticism is about might makes right and rule by sheer force. And that these two trends, Atlanticism and Eurasianism, civilization of the sea, civilization of the land, they very much exist throughout history. All three of those approaches, the American system versus the English system of Henry Charles Carey, Lenin's theory of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and the geopolitical approach of Alexander Dugin, Atlanticism and Eurasianism, all three of those approaches point to the same thing, which is that the global economy that we currently live under, which is centered around Wall Street and London, the Atlanticist, imperialist, English system, British Empire, global order, this rule of the world by big banks and monopolies based in Western countries is in a state of decay. And in revolt against it around the world, you have the Eurasian superpowers, Russia and China, that are rising up in alliance with Iran, in alliance with Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua and many other countries that have broken out of the domination of the Western system. And as the Atlanticist system is collapsing, I argued, and it was actually me, this is my concept that I put forward first in this book, We Are City Builders, which was the first textbook of the Center for Political Innovation, We Are City Builders. I put forward the notion of the Atlanticist pathology. And the Atlanticist pathology is mental illness as a mechanism of social control. And we're going to be talking about the Atlanticist pathology tonight, because in order to stay on the revolutionary road, you must combat the Atlanticist pathology in yourself and in others. And there is an individual, psychological, personal, spiritual journey that all of us have to embark on if we wish to stay on the revolutionary road. And that means actively combating the Atlanticist pathology, because we live in a society where mental illness is being cultivated as a mechanism of social control. And the mental illness that is being cultivated is the Atlanticist pathology. So let's talk about this. 1888, something happened that had never happened before in history. Right? We've always had murderers in history, right? It's in the Bible, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. People get mad at other people and kill them, right? Husband finds out the wife is cheating on him, goes and kills her, goes and kills the man she's cheating with. Somebody feels that somebody else stole from them, so they go and kill them. Somebody wants to rob somebody, so they go kill them and rob from them. Murder happens. It's one of the unfortunate aspects of human civilization. Crime, murder. However, in 1888, there was a type of murder that had never been seen anywhere in the world. And it happened in Whitechapel, which is a district in London. And it was crimes that I believe they have finally identified the individual who did it, but there's still debate. But for a long time, these murders were widely unsolved. And they were the murders of Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack the Ripper was not his real name. We don't really know who he was. There's some people who say we do at this point. I think they have an individual picked out. They say it was definitely him, but there's still debate. And Jack the Ripper was the nickname that the press and the media and the police gave to this murderer in Whitechapel. Whitechapel was a district in London where there were a lot of prostitutes. And there was a wealthy man, he was quite wealthy, named Jack the Ripper. And he would go to Whitechapel and he would hire prostitutes. And instead of just having sex with them, he would cut them into pieces. He would violently murder them. Sorry to pick International Women's Day to talk about a horrendous crime against women, but here we go. Jack the Ripper was the world's first serial killer. And that kind of murder had never happened before in history. Have people murdered people before? Sure. Have people murdered women before? But Jack the Ripper was an individual who was sexually perverted to the point that the way he got himself off was killing women. And he would hire women as prostitutes, and he would mutilate their bodies, and he would cut them up, and apparently he was a surgeon, because he knew a lot about human anatomy. Based on what the police were able to deduce. I don't want to get into detail about this. It's a little R-rated. May not be the ideal stream to watch with your kids, but we'll get past this. The rest of this isn't as gross and violent. But Jack the Ripper, he was a serial killer who murdered women for sexual gratification. That had never happened before. And the whole world was like, what in the world? What in the world is going on in London? So the police of London immediately said that they wanted anyone who knew any information about Jack the Ripper to send them a letter. So the London Times, the Times of London, received thousands and thousands and thousands of letters from individuals claiming to be Jack the Ripper. Now, that was even weirder than the murder itself. It was weird enough. No one had ever committed horrendous crimes like this before. But then thousands of people sent letters to the Times of London saying that they were Jack the Ripper, and describing how they had carried out the murders in lurid detail. And that showed that while there was, at this point, only one Jack the Ripper, there were thousands and thousands of people in Britain who were sexually turned on by what Jack the Ripper had done and fantasized about engaging in horrendous crimes against women this way. And that was certainly shocking. So Jack the Ripper, whoever he was, realized there were thousands and thousands of people stealing his thunder. So Jack the Ripper sent body parts from one of the women he murdered in the infamous From Hell letter. He signed the letter From Hell, Jack the Ripper, and he sent the body parts of women that were confirmed to actually be from the bodies that he killed. And so there was the infamous From Hell letter from actually Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack the Ripper was the first one in 1888, but pretty soon there were more. And starting in the 1880s and the 1890s, all over the world, we started to see serial killers. Now, there had never been serial killers before. But yet, for most of the 20th century, this was a very common occurrence. You have, Ted Bundy. You have Jeffrey Dahmer. You have these people who are turned on by murdering other people, usually women, and they commit these horrendous crimes. Now, in recent years, there's actually been a downturn in serial killers. We don't see it as much anymore. But what caused this kind of insanity, this kind of violent criminal insanity that had never existed before? Well, the British Empire at the time was very much cultivating the population to be good imperialists. And they were actively changing their culture to make people effective imperialists. And one of the things that they were doing was they were urging parents not to hug their children and not to give their children affection. The belief was that, especially for men, if you hugged little boys, if you gave little boys presents on their birthdays, if you were kind to little boys, they would be weaklings. And so it was necessary to be cold with your children. That was the belief at the time. Furthermore, there was the introduction of violence in everyday life. Children were trained, especially boys, were trained to be military, and were trained to think about war and killing constantly. There were violent punishments that were enacted that became kind of, ritualized. In addition to that, there was a huge amount of sexual repression. Now, sexual repression is something that, traditional society generally does, but Victorian England was obsessive in the idea that if you masturbated, you would become crazy. They would cover up the feet of pianos with curtains because they thought the feet of pianos looked like human feet and people might be sexually turned on by the legs of pianos. The word leg, which is just a word for part of the human anatomy, was considered an obscene word because you might be turned on by the word leg. So you were never supposed to say leg. You were supposed to say limb, right? And there was just a huge effort to crack down on anything sexual in society. Just a huge, huge amount of sexual repression. So if you combine the lack of affection that you're giving children with the constant obsession with war and violence, with ritual punishment being enacted, on top of that, if you have a huge amount of sexual repression, you're going to get people like Jack the Ripper. And Victorian Atlanticist society produced a form of insanity that had never been seen before. And that was the rise of Jack the Ripper. And all through the 20th century, up into the 80s and 90s, serial killers were a thing. Serial killers are not a thing anymore. It happens occasionally, but it's very rare. Now we have mass shootings. Mass shootings have replaced serial killers as the new form of violent mental illness from Atlanticist society. And mass shootings had also never really happened before. There was an incident where a school was bombed in the 1920s. The school was dynamited and a number of children were killed. But largely, you did not have this phenomenon of young men going to their school or going to a public place and taking out a gun and killing as many people as they possibly can with their gun. That had never happened before. So now we live in the age of we don't have serial killers, but we have mass shooters. And mass shooters, when they first started happening, were something that had never been seen before. And it originated in Western civilization. Just like the British Empire gave us serial killers, the United States has given the world mass shooters. Well, all of this is rooted in Atlanticism. And let's just talk about that briefly, right? The Jack the Ripper serial killer types, these are men that to some degree or other are insecure in their masculinity. They feel that they have something to prove, and they feel that in order to prove their manhood or whatever, it is necessary to murder women. And to some degree or other, they are out of touch with their own sexuality. Their sexuality has become perverted in a way that the way that they feel sexual is to commit horrendous crimes against women. It's a really, really horrendous thing. Mass shooters, on the other hand, there's no evidence that mass shooters are sexualizing their crime, but mass shooters are also like serial killers. They are very, very much obsessed with violence, right? The catharsis or the thrill of violence, right? Serial killers are sexualizing it. Mass shooters, maybe they're not sexualizing it, but they're very obsessed with violence. They're obsessed with violence, and they also are very insecure. Serial killers are generally insecure about their own manhood. In many cases, serial killers have been shown to have erectile dysfunction, and they feel they need to prove their masculinity by murdering. And mass shooters are generally people that are insecure, men that are insecure in their masculinity, and they feel they need to prove their masculinity by engaging in mass shootings. Now, this kind of behavior, serial killers and now mass shooters, this is insanity, dangerous, violent insanity on a level that humanity has not really seen before, but it is tied in very much with the ideology that is espoused by the Atlanticist, globalist, imperialist system. So what does the Atlanticist, global imperialist system believe in? Well, the ideology of globalism, imperialism is called liberalism. And I'm not talking about liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans. I'm talking about liberalism, the school of thought that came out of the struggle to overturn feudalism. The fight for individual rights, the ideology that celebrates the rights of the individual. This is called liberalism. And in our society in the West, everybody believes in liberalism. The so-called left emphasizes individual and personal liberalism, social liberalism, your right to be gay if you want to be gay, your right to use drugs if you want to use drugs, your right to not live according to a defined gender role, your right to be who you want to be without any obligation to society, etc. Whereas the right emphasizes economic liberalism. The government must stay out of the economy. You shouldn't have to pay any taxes. Corporations shouldn't have to abide by any regulations. You're on your own. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, every man for himself. Liberalism, individualism in opposition to collectivism, is the defining ideology of the so-called collective West. The NATO countries, the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, we believe in liberalism. We believe in individualism. Now, on top of that, the British Empire in particular started believing in Malthusianism and the concept of overpopulation. And just as much as we believe in obsessing with the individual and individual rights in the West, Malthusianism is also becoming part of the ruling ideology in the West. Children in school are starting to have climate anxiety because they're being told that, oh my gosh, we're all going to die from global warming unless we reduce consumption. We are constantly being told that there's too many people on the planet. There's too much CO2. We're using up too many resources. We're a cancer on the planet, etc. So in addition to the radical individualism and liberalism, we're being told that the problems of the world are due to overpopulation and that there are too many people in the world. Now, in addition to that, the economics of the West is this belief that, again, the government shouldn't be involved in the economy. And it's this belief that the market will naturally solve things. Adam Smith called it the invisible hand. The invisible hand, right? The idea that the market will just naturally lead to the right conclusion. And then that combines with what's called social Darwinism, which is an economic and political interpretation of Charles Darwin's theories of biology. Survival of the fittest. Now, many people have pointed out that Charles Darwin's idea of what is fittest is just, having children. But regardless, social Darwinists generally argued that America and Britain and France were the richest countries because we're just the best. We're just superior. We're the fittest. And the poor countries, they're poor because they're inferior. And it was the invisible hand, and it was social Darwinism. It was survival of the fittest. Rich people, good. Poor people, bad. Poor people are just naturally inferior, so you shouldn't try to do anything to correct poverty. Rich people are just naturally superior. The invisible hand, survival of the fittest, might makes right, etc., etc. Right? And then that combines with Alfred Mahan and his concept of sea power, right? Alfred Mahan was the military theorist who argued that the way to dominate the world was to have a mighty navy, the first book of geopolitics that was ever written. So we have a gigantic navy to dominate the world. From there, you get Friedrich Nietzsche and his notion of the blonde beast and the idea that there is no real truth and that the only way to be heroic is to engage in deconstruction. This is philosophical irrationalism. Nietzsche is celebrating that Europe is becoming less Christian as it becomes a colonial power, and it's becoming much more beast-like. The blonde beast, might makes right. We're just brutally colonizing the people of Africa and Asia. And then from there, you get Leo Strauss and Irving Kristol, the founders of neoconservatism, who believe that there are some people that are just naturally superior. They're called the philosopher kings, and that they must control the inferior ones, and so that they can rule. And if the inferior ones get together, that's dangerous. And that the philosopher kings, the superior ones that are smart enough to understand things, they need to rule. This is neoconservatism, neocon thought. So if you combine all of that, you get the ideology of the Western world. Individualism above all else, anti-collectivism, belief that there's just too many people in the world, we're breeding too much, belief that some people are just naturally superior to others, and the invisible hand and survival of the fittest leads to the rich just ruling over everybody else. Sea power and the belief you need to have a mighty military to dominate the whole world in order to have a strong society. The belief that morality, right and wrong, is for suckers, and that we should become more animalistic, and might makes right, become the blonde beast. Philosophical irrationalism, the belief of the philosopher kings. There are some people that are just superior to others. All of this is an ideology that basically says the majority of humanity are dangerous animals, and they must be kept asleep. Right? That if the majority of humanity starts asserting its will, starts getting politically active, that this is a threat, right? That they'll take away the sacred individualism, they'll create some kind of collectivism, they'll start breeding and overpopulating, they'll screw up the natural order and want the poor people who are not the fittest and are not, the invisible hand to start having justice. They'll destroy our mighty navy. They'll try to force a moral and ethical system on us and get rid of philosophical irrationalism. They won't let the philosopher kings just rule over us. The Atlanticist ideology, whether it's liberalism, Malthusianism, invisible hand, Adam Smith economics, social Darwinism, the sea power, philosophical irrationalism, neoconservatism, all of the Atlanticist ideology leads to the conclusion that human beings are dangerous animals and everything must be done to keep human beings asleep. They must be kept asleep because we are dangerous animals. This is an anti-human ideology. The Atlanticist worldview, the worldview of the imperialists and the globalists, is an anti-human worldview. So, how do they want us to exist? They want us living biologically. Now, what does living biologically mean? Well, plants and animals are technically alive in the biological sense. They are definitely alive. If you've got roses and they haven't died and they're bright red, that means that they are alive. If you have a puppy, your puppy, unless it's dead, it's alive, right? Mice, rats, squirrels, monkeys, tulips, plants and animals are alive. They are not dead. And, in biology, there is an understanding of who is alive and who is dead. Plants and animals are alive, but they are only alive in the biological sense. They are not alive in the human sense because, as I said at the beginning of the stream, other species only interact with their environment, but human beings press their will onto the environment and master the environment. And your tulips don't do that. And your roses don't do that. And your dog doesn't do that. And a squirrel doesn't do that. And a monkey doesn't do that. And a rat and a gnat and an insect doesn't do that. They are alive, but they are not creative. They are not innovating. They are not impressing their will onto nature. So they are alive, but they are not alive in the human sense. They are not alive as humans are. They are alive only as animals, only interacting with the surrounding ecosystem. They are not creative, and they do not impress their will onto nature. Rats, monkeys, tulips, weeds, dandelions, grass, you name it, plants and animals, they respond to stimulus. They avoid pain. They seek pleasure, and they have no willpower, and they have no creativity. Globalism, imperialism seeks to create a humanity that is living biologically. That is what they want for humanity. They want us to be plants and animals. They want us to go through life, and if they introduce pain, we run away from it. If they give us a reward, give us pleasure, we run toward it. Not having any willpower, not having any consciousness, never stopping and saying, why are we doing this? How are we doing this? Not having new ideas, not having new innovations, just living the same way that your dog lives, the same way that a rat lives, the same way that a weed in the garden lives. They want you to be alive biologically, but they want you to be asleep in the human sense. This is very, very important. They want you living only biologically Whereas those of us who are revolutionaries, what do we seek to do? We seek to awaken people. We want you to wake up. We don't want you to only live biologically. We want you to ask big questions. We want you to see the world around you and try to change it for the better. We want you to engage in building an organization with your fellow human beings. We want you to understand how the world around you exists and struggle to make it better. We want you to be an innovator. That's what we want. We want you to awaken. And they want you to be asleep. We want you to be alive in the human philosophical sense, and they want you to be only living biologically. And this is really important because I'm sure you all know people, you walk by them every day, people that are only living biologically. They're alive. They are absolutely alive. They are not dead. They have feelings. They have emotions. They've got wives and kids and husbands and houses and apartments, but they are only living biologically. They are going through life on autopilot. They are avoiding pain. They are seeking pleasure, and they don't ask big questions, and they don't engage in creative thought, and they don't seek to make the world around them better. They are going through life on autopilot, seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, like rats in a maze, right? And we all know people. Most of humanity has been subdued to the state of living biologically. And our job as revolutionaries is to wake people up. We are giving people pamphlets and books because we want them to wake up. We are out in the streets yelling about the danger of New World War because we want to wake people up. We are not brainwashing people. Humanity is already brainwashed, and we are trying to unbrainwash people. We are trying to awaken them from their slumber, and that is what we are doing. We are struggling to teach people to think, to use their minds and wrangle with the big questions around them, to think and to assert their humanity and to press their will onto the environment. We are struggling to prevent people from living biologically and get people to start living as humans are meant to live. However, the Atlanticist system works very, very, very hard to keep humanity in a state of living biologically because they view humanity in such a negative way. It fits their ideology. They view humans as very dangerous. And if we all wake up and if we all start asserting our will and if we all start demanding our rights, that screws up their natural order. Right? The Atlanticist, globalist, imperialist worldview says we need to be asleep. We need to be living biologically. Whereas our worldview says we need to be awake and that human creativity and human brilliance, this is what makes humanity great and that we want to awaken humanity. Next. So that brings us to Sigmund Freud. Now, Sigmund Freud, I'll just tell you straight up, I don't think Sigmund Freud was a good person. Sigmund Freud was very much a predator. Sigmund Freud was very much a charlatan. Sigmund Freud did believe that human beings are animals. However, Sigmund Freud was the first person to really to spend his life examining how human beings think. And even though he wasn't a good dude, and even though his worldview, which is very much a materialist and biological determinist, human beings as animals worldview, even though he had all that, Sigmund Freud spent his entire life, he was a doctor, a medical doctor, and he spent his entire life interviewing people, asking them about their problems, taking notes. And after decades of doing this, he developed a system for understanding how people think. And so this is what Sigmund Freud taught us about how human beings think. And I think he's right about a lot. He's very, very much correct in how human beings think. He may interpret it differently, but he understands how your brain works. According to Sigmund Freud, your brain has three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. Your id is your bodily desires. If you're hungry, if part of you is hungry and wants to eat, that's your id. If you are horny and you want to have sex, that's your id. If you have to go take a shit, that's your id. If you're tired after a long day's work, that's your id, right? Your id is your bodily, biological desires to eat, to sleep, to shit, to have sex, whatever, right? You know, your id is your purely animal function. In addition to your id, you have your ego, and your ego is your conscious mind. And that's your thoughts, right? You know, if you're thinking, hey, you know, I think I might do this. Hey, I think I might do that. The thoughts that you have that are your conscious thoughts where you think, you know, I think blank. I liked this movie. I didn't like this book. I want to go fishing. I want to go to college. I want to be a biologist. I am interested in Pokemon. Those thoughts in your mind, that's called your ego. Now, in addition to your ego, you have your super ego. And your super ego is your conscience. It is the voice of someone you look up to. It is the voice of your parents. It is the voice of your teacher. It is the voice of somebody who you view as superior to you, someone who you want to impress, someone you want to be proud of you. That's your super ego. It's not you. It's somebody that is judging you, right? And your super ego is the part of your brain that is pressuring you to do what is right, what you believe is right. It's your conscience, right? It's that voice in your head that says, don't steal the cookie. Don't steal the cookie. Don't cheat on that test. Oh my gosh, you could have worked out so many times this week, Caleb. You could have gone to the gym and exercised, but you didn't. You're letting us all down. Your super ego is the conscience, the judging part of your mind, right? It's not your regular thoughts. It's that conscience, that parental voice, that superior voice in your head. And these are the three parts of your brain. When you are thinking, you have an id that is thinking, you have an ego that is thinking, and you have a super ego that is thinking. Now, in addition to your conscious mind, you have what is called your subconscious mind. And those are all the things that you are feeling and thinking and remembering that you're not aware of. At this very moment, you are remembering something, but you're not aware of it. At this very moment, you have a desire that you don't know you have. At this very moment, you're angry about something that you don't know you're angry about. In addition to the thoughts that actually enter your mind, right? When you're hungry, you think, I'm hungry. You're conscious of your hunger. When you are bored, you're consciously of the fact that you're bored. When you are, making a decision, you're conscious of that decision. But in addition to that, you have your subconscious mind. There are all kinds of feelings and desires and memories and drives that you have that you're not aware of because you just can't handle it, right? It's a memory that you've tucked back into your mind. You've repressed it. It's a feeling that you have that you don't really feel good about. You feel like you shouldn't want it, so you suppress it. It's an anger that you have at somebody that is just too dangerous to deal with. Imagine, say you have a coworker and you really hate them. Well, if you're going to be able to be successful at your job, you can't be thinking all day about, I hate my coworker, I hate my coworker. So what you will do is you will repress that anger. You will just put that anger aside, and it's still there. You still hate your coworker, but all day long, you don't sit there at your cubicle going, I hate my coworker, I hate my coworker. No, you repress it, and it's still there in the back of your mind, but you've repressed it. It's in your subconscious. You're not consciously thinking, I hate my coworker, I hate my coworker. That's your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is full of all kinds of things. You remember everything. From the moment you were born, even before you were born, you have subconscious memory of everything that has ever happened to you. Even when you were in your mother's womb, you have subconscious data of that. There is memories of before you were born in your mind. Everything is there, but you don't draw it up. You can't draw it up all the time, because it's in your subconscious. So in addition to your conscious memories and your conscious thoughts, you have a subconscious mind. That's very, very important. Now, Sigmund Freud goes on to point out that as a result of the traditional family, we all have subconscious impulses and drives that naturally occur. If you grow up in a traditional family with a mom and a dad and brothers and sisters, if you grow up in our society, which is, things are changing. There's a lot of single parents out there. There's all kinds of different things. But for the most part, everyone who grows up in our society, there are certain feelings that you will have over the course of your life. And they are natural, and they all serve a normal purpose. One is called libido, and that's excitement about aggression and sex. We human beings, we love to fight. even though many of us are very afraid of fighting, even though many of us do everything we can to avoid fighting, we're excited by violence. It's just a reality. That's why we go to movies that are full of violence. That's why we watch sporting events where the two teams fight each other. Human beings are aroused and excited by violence and aggression. That's just the reality, right? We enjoy a good fight. Sometimes we enjoy just watching it. Sometimes we enjoy participating in it. Violence, in addition to being something many of us are very afraid of and traumatized of, we are aroused by it. In addition to that, sex, right? It's one of the most basic natural desires is to have sex. People have sex. The drive to be aggressive and the excitement about aggression and the sex drive are called libido. And it's a good thing we have libido because if we didn't have libido, no one would reproduce. If we didn't have libido, people wouldn't go out and defend their family and communities. If we didn't have libido, you wouldn't be able to go and enjoy a good movie, right? A good movie involves conflict, right? Involves people fighting each other. And you wouldn't be able to enjoy that movie. You wouldn't be able to sit in that movie theater and eat the popcorn and enjoy, watching the Avengers fight, Thor fight, I don't know, Mega Man or whatever his name is. You wouldn't enjoy it if you didn't have libido, right? So libido isn't bad. It's natural, right? If people didn't have sex, we'd have no children. If people didn't have aggression to some degree or other, life wouldn't be normal. There's nothing inherently wrong with libido, but it exists, and that sex drive and violence are connected. In addition to that, you have your Oedipal feelings. When you are a teenager, you want to kill your parents, right? When you're a teenager, you want to be independent. You want to show that you're not a child anymore. When you're a child, you're okay with being a child. But when you get to be a teenager, you really want to assert your independence. And generally, you tend to have resentment and anger at the parent of the same gender. If you're a young man, you don't like your dad. If you're a young woman, you don't like your mother. And that part of you wants to kill your mother or kill your father to show that you are independent, to assert that you are not a child, you are not their property. You want to kill your parents, and that's just natural. And it's good that teenagers feel that way because that's what inspires them to go out and start their own jobs and their own careers and move out and assert their independence, right? You can't be a child forever. And so the Oedipal feelings are you just naturally, your body, your mind is saying, I need to be out on my own. I need to assert my independence. I need to show that I'm not just the property of my parents, that I have my own ideas, my own person, etc. Right? And again, the Oedipal feelings are natural, right? However, in addition to your Oedipal feelings, you have what's called parental transference. A child would die without its parents, right? If a baby is born and somebody's not feeding that baby, it dies, right? And that every child deep down has the desire to be cared for. And they want their caregiver, their parent who's caring for them, to be all powerful and to love them with no conditions, completely unconditionally. And they want to be loved and cared for by an all-powerful figure. And they want that, right? And that even as you become a teenager, even as you become an adult, all of us deep down have parental transference. We want to be loved by an all-powerful figure. We long to be taken care of, to be guided. And that is a drive that you also have. You have your libido, you have your Oedipal feelings, you have your parental transference. All of these impulses serve their own purpose, right? And they all have a need, right? If a child didn't long for their parents, they wouldn't seek out the parental protection care that every child needs. If the Oedipal complex didn't exist, teenagers would never grow up into adults, right? If libido didn't exist, we wouldn't reproduce. These are all natural things, and they all serve a purpose. And it's good that we have all of these. However, they can get out of whack if something goes wrong, right? And that's where all of this develops, right? That's what we're going to get into tonight. If your libido, your Oedipal feelings, your parental transference feelings, if they get out of whack, that's where things go wrong. And nobody is perfect. And generally, everyone is what Sigmund Freud called neurotic, right? That Sigmund Freud argued that there were two types of mental illness. There is neurosis and psychosis. Neurotic people are people that keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. You ever hear that? They say, oh, the definition of insanity is making the same mistake over and over and over again. Well, that's what neurosis is that you keep making a mistake in your life and you're not aware that you keep making this mistake. And the reason you make the mistake is probably because of the fact that there are subconscious feelings motivating your behavior. You don't know why you're doing what you're doing. And that to some degree or other, your libido, your Oedipal drive, your parental transference, whatever, for whatever reason, you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again. And it's because there are probably subconscious desires that you have that you're not aware of. And that's called neurosis. And everyone is neurotic to some degree or other. Nobody is perfect, right? We all have feelings that we're unaware of. We all have motivations and desires that are subconscious that we're not aware of. None of us have a perfect libido, a perfect Oedipal feeling, a perfect parental transference. None of us are totally in touch with everything. So everyone's neurotic to some degree or other. And neurosis is simply the inability to notice patterns because we're not aware of our subconscious desires. However, in addition to neurosis, which everyone is, some people are much more neurotic than others. Addiction is a really common form of neurosis, right? Addicted people want to stop using drugs, but they keep doing it, right? And they're making the mistake over and over and over again, right? They don't want to use drugs, but they are using them against their will because they're neurotic. There's a pattern. And usually addiction is rooted in trauma. They have trauma that they're unaware of, that they've suppressed, and they're trying to medicate or take care of themselves, right? Addiction is probably the most common form of neurosis, right? Is that the addict has a drive to keep using drugs or keep doing the addictive behavior because of desires, traumas, pains, motivations that they're not aware of, right? That's neurosis. Everyone's neurotic to some degree or other. And there's many different kinds of neurosis: depression, paranoia, compulsive behavior, addictive behavior. There's a million types of neurosis, and everyone is a little bit neurotic, right? And this is personality types, right? They talk about personality types. Basically, it's how you're neurotic, right? If you're a really controlling person, that's one type of neurosis, right? If you're a really creative and messy person, that's another type of neurosis, right? And then all the personality types is basically just measuring how neurotic you are, how your neurosis manifests itself, right? However, in addition to neurosis, there's what's called psychosis. And psychosis is very, very different than neurosis. Psychotic people are people that are in so much pain that they lose touch with reality. They start seeing things that are not there, and their ability to process information is gone. They are hearing things that are not there. They're seeing things that are not there. They believe things that are not true. They hear sounds. I mean, they're out of touch with reality, and that basically they're so stressed out by whatever has them upset, whatever conscious or subconscious impulse they have, that they check out of reality. Suddenly they start hearing things and seeing things. And generally, psychosis is generally manifest in the form of what's called schizophrenia. And schizophrenic people, they don't make eye contact when you see them. And they don't interact with the environment around them at all because they're in their own psychotic world. They have kind of withdrawn from reality. They don't hear things the way normal people do. Great example of psychosis is, I interview people on the street for my job. I go out and I do what's called vox pops, where I interview random people on the street. I try my hardest to never interview homeless people because homeless people tend to be psychotic and they can't answer your questions, and many times I've asked a homeless person, what do you think of Donald Trump and his policies? And then I point the microphone at them and they say, in China, the trains have a lot of urine on the floor, and that's why we need motorcycles to go really fast. And I say, I'm sorry, but what do you think of Donald Trump and his policies? And then they get upset and they say, I told you, in China, the trains go really fast and there's urine on the floor, and that's why we need motorcycles. And you're just like, okay, they're not communicating with you. When I asked them about what do you think of Donald Trump and his policies, they didn't hear that. They heard something else. And then they said to me, the trains go really fast in China and there's urine on the floor and motorcycles go really fast. And to them, that makes perfect sense. They're not processing information correctly. They are psychotic, right? And people that are schizophrenic, psychotic, they can't communicate with you, right? They're they're in their own universe where words don't mean the same thing, where they're withdrawn. They've kind of in response to an extreme amount of stress and pain, they've completely retreated into their own world, and they can't talk to you. And it's sad. It's sad. That's what psychosis is. So this is Sigmund Freud's understanding of how the human mind works. And so here we go. So what is leftism? What is leftism? Leftism is a political movement that started at the time of the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, those who were, they overthrew the king, and those who were loyal to the king sat on the right, and those who were loyal to the Jacobins and the Girondists and the revolutionaries, they sat on the left. And leftism was the ideology of revolution, of social progress, etc. And it really had no real meaning other than if you were for the old world, you sat on the right. If you were excited about the new world, the birth of the modern world, you sat on the left. But what was the French Revolution? The French Revolution was very much an explosion of libido, right? It was that in feudalism, sex is very carefully controlled. Who you can have sex with is very heavily controlled. If you have sex outside of marriage, you can be burned at the stake. You can be killed, right? And that sex is very controlled. And if people are in charge of you, they can abuse you and mistreat you, and you just have to take it, right? If you're a peasant, you cannot look a landlord or a noble in the face, and if he verbally abuses you or kicks you around, you just have to take it. You're not allowed to have any anger or display any aggression if you are a peasant or most of society, and you can only have sex under certain circumstances. Everyone's sexual desires and everyone's aggression and anger is heavily packed in. And if you have sex in a way they say you can't, they kill you. And if you talk back to the landlord or, disrespect the king, they kill you. And it's this very, very heavily controlled way of existing. Well, as capitalism was coming along, as the emergent mercantile classes came along, and they wanted to overthrow feudalism. So what did they do? They said, let it out. Let out your anger. Let out your sexual desires. And the French Revolution was an explosion of sexual freedom and vengeance. Now, the peasantry of France, they were humiliated in many different ways. They were degraded. In fact, one thing that existed in France was called prima nocta. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but Frederick Engels mentions this in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. One of the ways that the nobility in France would humiliate the peasants was that if you were a peasant, right, you had a landlord or a noble who lived over you. And before you got to have sex with your wife, the noble before any peasant man, when he got married on his wedding night, before he got to have sex with his wife, the local noble did to humiliate him, right? And that was a thing that happened. Imagine how degrading, right? Sex is already so controlled. You're not allowed to have sex until you get married. Well, finally, you as a peasant man are able to have sex, and then before you get to have sex, the noble rapes your wife. That's how degraded the peasants were. And they were constantly humiliated. They couldn't look a landowner in the face. They couldn't express their sexual desires. They could not speak up. If they felt mistreated, they couldn't say so, right? And so the French Revolution comes along and says, let your anger out, let your rage out, right? And let your sexual desires out. So much so that people forget that one of the main agitators of the French Revolution was a guy named the Marquis de Sade. Marquis de Sade was a noble in France who was a sexual predator, and he would abuse women, sexually assault women, torture people. He was a pretty awful dude who wrote pornographic stories about how, and usually the pornographic stories consisted of, some woman going through France getting raped and abused by people that are supposed to be good people, like priests and mayors and upstanding citizens, all while they lecture her about how there's no such thing as right and wrong. And that Marquis de Sade was an atheist, and Marquis de Sade was an advocate of sexual passion, and he was also a sexual predator. And at the time of the French Revolution, Marquis de Sade and his pornography was everywhere. And he was considered one of the main thinkers of the French Revolution. And the Marquis de Sade even suggested that to keep the French Revolution going, they should have theaters where there'd be women on display with their naked bodies, so that would inspire people to go out. The French Revolution was taking a very conservative society and unleashing everyone's sexual passion. And the symbol of the French Revolution was the red cap, right? The peasants wore red caps, and eventually the red flag, which became a symbol of the left, the red flag became the symbol of the French Revolution. And red is what? It's the color of blood. It is the color of anger, and it is the color of sexual passion. And so red and leftism became very much a movement about unleashing people's sexual passion, unleashing people's anger, etc. Now, what happened in the French Revolution? They killed the king, and the king is the father of the nation. So you could say it was also Oedipal, right? That he's the father of the country, and they killed him. Interesting story, the March to Versailles. The French Revolution, during the French Revolution, one of the big events was called the March to Versailles. The King of France lived in Versailles, which is a very big palace. And the peasants of Paris, the very poor people of Paris, the peasants from all over the country piled into Paris because there were crop failures. There wasn't enough food, and they were all piled into Paris, and they were hungry. And so the revolutionaries, the Jacobins or whatever, they assembled a mob of people, and they all marched from Paris to Versailles. Now, the peasants, they all loved the king because the king was known to protect them from the nobles. The king was the big boss at the top who was always saying that the nobles should treat the peasants better. And the king, that was his job, as he was the guy who could tell the nobles what to do. So generally, the peasants loved the king. They didn't quite like their local noble because he was the guy oppressing them. But they liked the king, and the king would go out and he would tell the nobles, be nice to your peasants. And the king was seen as this kind father of the nation who would protect the peasants occasionally from the nobles. That was the role of the king. So when the March to Versailles began, all the peasants thought they were going out there to get the king to give them food. And they thought the king was a great guy. He was the father of the country. They were going to go to Versailles, and he was going to see all the crowds of hungry people, and he'd be so moved he would give them food. So they were going out there with a sense of parental transference, right? They marched from Paris to Versailles with the feeling that we're going to get out there, and the king, who is our father, who's the leader of the country, is going to give us food. Well, what happened, right? They marched to Versailles, and in the process of marching to Versailles, their parental transference transformed into Oedipal feelings. And eventually, when they got to Versailles, they did not beg the king to give them food. They arrested the king. And eventually the king got his head cut off. They beheaded the king. So their parental transference was transformed into an Oedipal feeling, and the king was executed. And the French Revolution was followed by the Reign of Terror, where they just executed nobles in mass. They just started exterminating the nobles. Anyone who'd been from the nobility class got their head cut off, But the French Revolution did not create an egalitarian society. It created capitalism, and there were factory owners and factory workers, and there were hungry people. And even though they'd promised liberté, égalité, fraternité, they did not create an egalitarian society. They created the French Republic. They created the government of Napoleon. They created the French Empire. They created a society which was full of injustice, which was, even though there were no kings and even though the rights of man had been declared, there was still injustice. So there were a number of people in Europe who were inspired by the French Revolution, and they called themselves the left, and they wanted another revolution to make things more fair and free. And all across Europe in 1848, they had what was called the Spring of Nations. In almost every European country, there was a revolt. And there was a revolt in England. There was a revolt in France. There was the German Revolution of 1848. There were multiple uprisings in Italy. There were over 200 revolutions or uprisings in 1848. They called it the Spring of Nations. Communism as a political movement originated in 1848. In 1848, there was a guy living in Germany named Karl Marx, and he was part of the 1848 German Revolution. And his group was called the Communist League. And the Communist League was a group of people in Germany that were part of the 1848 revolution. And in 1848, the people that were rising up all across Europe that wanted to keep the spirit of the French Revolution alive, that wanted to actually create liberty, égalité, fraternité, that the French Revolution hadn't created, they were kind of keeping the passion of the French Revolution going. They were called the Red Republicans. Red Republicans, meaning that they waved the red flag and they were fighting against monarchy and against feudalism. They were fighting for a republic. Interesting fact. The Republican Party of the United States got its name from the Republicans, the Republican uprisings of 1848. And a few years after the Spring of Nations in 1848, in the 1850s, they formed a new political party in America that was against slavery and was for freedom and justice for all. It was called the Republican Party, and it had small farmers in it, and it had labor unionists. And Karl Marx was a big supporter of the Republican Party. He even wrote for the New York Tribune, which was the Republican Party newspaper of New York City. And the Republican Party was part of the left. It was part of the revolutionary movement that wanted to carry out and make the ideals of the French Revolution real. It wanted to kill the kings. It wanted to create liberty and justice for all, liberty, égalité, fraternity. Leftism is largely based on libidinal and Oedipal feelings. And that's not bad, right? Look, if you want to overthrow feudalism, sucks. Feudalism absolutely sucks. Peasants have no rights. You can't think for yourself. You can't, have your own religion. If you speak up against the Pope, if you think a thought about religion that goes against what the Pope says, they burn you at the stake. Peasants have no rights. The king rules with absolute authority. They don't have a very high level of technological development. Feudalism sucks. So ripping apart feudalism was a good thing. And in order to rip it apart, you had to really tap into people's teenage desire to kill their parents, right? Kill the king. He's the father of the nation and he sucks. We're going to cut his head off. And you have to let people unleash their rage, right? I'm a peasant. I've been oppressed. I've been exploited. I'm going to let my anger out. I'm going to kill the nobles, right? And you have to let people unleash their sexual desires. I've been holding it in and I want to have sex. And so it makes sense that in order to topple feudalism, you would have to unleash libidinal and Oedipal feelings on a massive scale. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Now, in response to the left in France, you had what were called monarchists. And monarchists were people who wanted to bring the monarchy back. And in France, the monarchists, they were called the Party of Order because they saw the left as being a movement of disorder and chaos and revenge. And the conservatives, they were the Party of Order. And they wanted to bring back the king who was the father. So parental transference became associated with the right? Because they want a king, they want stability and order, they want a kind, caring parent there who will provide them, will love the nation and provide them with safety and security. They're all powerful and all of that. And the left, they want to unleash libido, they want to unleash their Oedipal impulses. Well, the right is appealing to parental transference. And the right also tends to be associated with nationalism. What do people generally call the country? Russia is Mother Russia. It's the motherland. And what is Germany? Germany is the fatherland, right? And, the nation is, it's our country is like a parental figure. Nationalism plays into parental transference, right? Uncle Sam, the image of America, is a fatherly figure. He's an old guy with a red, white, and blue hat and a beard. He's a fatherly figure. And the Statue of Liberty, right? That's Columbia, right? Early in American history, the icon of America, you had Uncle Sam, who was like a fatherly figure, but you also had Columbia, the gem of the ocean, right? And it was this goddess-like motherly figure, right? And what is the Statue of Liberty? She's a woman, a caring woman, and she says, "Give me, you're tired, you're poor. Come, I will take care of you." She's the mother, right? That's what the Statue of Liberty is. She's your mother, right? And that nationalism and patriotism are associated with parental transference, as is the Party of Order, as is conservatism. So conservatism is pushing parental transference. The left is pushing Oedipal feelings and libidinal feelings. This is all very, very important, right? And this is how politics develops, right? So that then brings us to the Russian Revolution, right? The first communist revolution to ever be successful is you have the Russian Revolution. And the Russian Revolution is the Tsar is overthrown by the provisional government. The provisional government is then overthrown by the Bolsheviks. And the Tsar is brought down, and the Bolshevik party comes to power in Russia. And the Bolsheviks are technically a leftist movement, right? They're social democrats, Marxists. They study the French Revolution. They're part of the revolutionary movement, the left, that is spread across Europe. But even before the Russian Revolution, everybody notices that there's something about the Bolsheviks that just doesn't seem normal for leftists. They're a little bit out of touch with leftists. For example, the Bolsheviks build a party of new type, only for people who give the whole of their lives. Now, generally, revolutionary organizations in Europe are debating societies, where as long as you agree with 3 or 4 main principles, you can sign up and join. And there's fierce internal debate, and it's constant debate and all of that. They're debating societies, and they're very loose. Everyone can think whatever they want, etc. Well, Lenin says, no, we're going to be a party of new type for those who give the whole of their lives. And the Bolshevik Party is very much modeled on the secret societies that exist in Russian history. The Old Believers, the Decembrists, and in Russia, there's a whole history of secret societies existing, of people that want to change Russia, taking oaths and forming very disciplined secret societies. So that's not very leftist, right? Leftists want total freedom and individualism and all of that. But the Bolsheviks are saying, no, we're going to have a very disciplined organization only for those who give the whole of their lives, etc. In addition to that, the Bolsheviks, they're very much considered to be a weird cult by European Marxism. People say that they're much like a monastic order of monks. People say they're a religious cult, and that's one way they're described, as a religious cult. And the European Marxists hate them, and they hate the European Marxists. And when World War I breaks out, Lenin is so angry that he declares that they shouldn't even call themselves social democrats anymore. They should use the word communist to describe themselves, so that nobody thinks that they're the same. Lenin absolutely hates the Second International, the social democrats who sold out and supported World War I. And he says, we're doing something completely new. We have this theory of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. We support nationalism, right? Whereas leftists were against nationalism. They said, workers of the world unite. Lenin says, well, no, we support nationalism. Lenin even writes an essay about why they support great Russian patriotism. And then he says, we're going to call ourselves the communists so that no one thinks that we're like those social democrats in Europe. So Lenin is a completely different thing than European social democracy. There's already a break. It's already much more Eastern with their party of new type, with their theory of imperialism. So then after the Russian Revolution, Lenin dies, and there's a fight between Stalin and Trotsky. Trotsky was born in Ukraine, but he spent most of his life in exile. He's lived in France and Germany and in New York City and in Vienna. And Trotsky is very much in love with European Marxism, and he hates Russia. He's very much a self-hating Russian. He was a victim of anti-Semitism at the hands of the Russian population. He was Jewish, and they didn't like Jews in Russia at this time. And so he really thinks the Russian people, and particularly the Russian peasantry, are a bunch of backward, ignorant, racist people. He doesn't like them. And he says that the only mission of the Soviet government is to spread revolution to the West. Permanent revolution. That's his theory. The theory of permanent revolution. Stalin, on the other hand, Stalin is the opposite of Trotsky. Stalin spent barely any time outside of Russia. He's from Georgia, which is part of the Russian Empire, and he spent his whole life in Azerbaijan and in Russia, and he's an organizer from Russia. He's from a small town in Georgia, right? And he went to seminary school, and his background is in Christian religion, and he's a totally different guy. So Stalin, the guy from a small town in Georgia, and Trotsky, the rich kid from Ukraine who spent most of his life living in Berlin and New York City and Vienna and Paris, they fight it out. And the majority of the Soviet people side with Stalin. And Stalin says we should build socialism in one country. We should work to organize the economy of the Soviet Union to raise our people up and build a strong economy, raise people up out of poverty, and build a strong country here. And we shouldn't be focusing on spreading communism all over the world. So permanent revolution, spread communism to Western Europe is rejected. Socialism in one country is adopted. Now, what happens when Stalin takes power in Russia? Well, this is in Moscow, and I've been here, I've seen it. This is Lenin, the founder of the Russian Revolution. And still to this day, you can go to this pyramid, this beautiful pyramid, and you can see Lenin's body. Right? Lenin's body is there on display. It was preserved. You can't touch it, but it's behind glass, and they have this mausoleum, it's called. It's this pyramid, and inside the pyramid is Lenin's body. Now, the pyramid looks very, very much like some kind of religious building, right? It looks almost like a church or a temple. On top of that, the Russian Orthodox Church at the time, one of their beliefs was that if you were a saint, your body did not decompose. All right, that if you were a saint, your body would not decompose. That was a way to prove that somebody was a saint when they died. So Stalin, after Lenin dies, he builds this temple to Lenin, and he preserves Lenin's body so that it doesn't decompose. And he engages in what is a very religious and traditional activity, right? He basically turns Lenin into a saint. But it gets more interesting. In Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church has what's called icons. Saints are people in the Russian Orthodox Church who died. And Russian Orthodox people pray to saints. Great people, great people from the Bible, great people from Russian history. When they die, they are saints, and you pray to saints. And you have what are called icons, which are images of the saint, and you pray to those images. You talk to the saint, you pray to the saint, right? Well, this is the poster they make of Lenin after he dies. It's a lot like an icon, right? Lenin is an icon, and they put Lenin everywhere, and he's practically got a halo around his head, right? So in a lot of ways, Stalin is reviving the Russian Orthodox religious traditions. Remember, Stalin went to seminary school. So he builds a church, a mausoleum with Lenin's body in it, and shows that Lenin's body is on display. He then puts icons of Lenin up all over the Soviet Union. And it's very much, these are Russian Orthodox and Christian traditions adjusted to serve the Soviet state ideology, which Stalin calls Marxism, Leninism. Very interesting. So Joseph Stalin is the leader of the Soviet Union. And his nickname is Country Joe. And I don't know if you've ever heard, but there was a rock band in the 1960s called Country Joe and the Fish. And that was for Stalin and Mao. Mao said the revolutionaries are the fish and the masses are the water. So he was the fish. And Country Joe, that was Stalin. He was from a small town in the country in Gori in Georgia. He was Country Joe and the Fish. And Stalin studied in seminary school. He was learning to be a priest, and he learned to read and write, and he got his education from being in seminary school. Stalin then went on to be the linchpin between the two layers in the Bolshevik Party. The Bolsheviks had two types of members. They had rich, wealthy intellectuals who were really well-read intellectuals and writers who wrote books and were really into promoting communism. And then you had labor unions, people who organized labor unions went on strike for better wages. And that was almost the two ranks. You had labor organizers and you had wealthy intellectuals. Stalin was both. He could read and write, so he could read, and he was very familiar with the complicated ideas of the wealthy intellectuals. But he was also from a small town, and he worked in many factories, and he was an organizer. So Stalin was the linchpin between the rank and file of the Bolshevik Party, the labor union organizers, and the wealthy intellectuals like Lenin and Bukharin and Zinoviev and all of that. So at the time, the Bolshevik Party, they had a theoretical magazine called Iskra, which means spark. But they also had a daily newspaper called Pravda, which means truth. And Pravda was edited by Stalin, and it was a daily newspaper. And the main thing that Pravda had in it was worker correspondence, was letters from people describing what they were going through, what they were feeling, letters from their factory about what the conditions were like. It was a place people would talk about their lives, worker correspondence, and Stalin would edit it. And, he would edit the worker correspondence, and he was the editor of this daily newspaper that everybody read called the Pravda, which was mainly just anonymous letters from people describing what the conditions in their factory was like, what their opinion of the news was. And it was just a newspaper, a daily newspaper that came out every day with people's opinions. And it was called The Truth, right? The mainstream media was considered to be fake news. But you could read The Truth by Stalin, which was letters that people wrote about how things really were and what the conditions were like. My boss at our factory is making us work extra hours. Yeah, well, this war that they're going to make us go fight against the Germans is bullshit. It was the truth, as told from the mouths of worker correspondents, everyday people. During World War II, Stalin brought back the Russian Orthodox Church, and now in Russia, many people believe Stalin was a Christian. Now, I am not convinced, right? But you will see, that is a picture from contemporary Russia of a young man there. He's got an icon of Stalin with a halo around his head. He believes Stalin was a Christian. There are many Russian nationalists who are opposed to communism and hate Lenin, who love Stalin, and they believe that he was a Christian, and they believe he was a great czar, and that Stalin was very much the father of the country, right? Stalin, as he's putting Lenin in the mausoleum, as he's putting icons of Lenin everywhere, Stalin is very much appealing not to people's libidinal and Oedipal desires, but rather to parental transference. He's the father of the country. He's making Lenin into a godlike, saint-like figure, right? Stalin is very much appealing to parental transference. Stalin is like the monarchists in France. He's conservative, and he brings the Russian Orthodox Church back. And he makes films glorifying Ivan the Terrible and Alexander Nevsky and the great czars. Stalin, in a way, is appealing to parental transference rather than libidinal feelings. Right? That's Stalin. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So, what happens? Well, after World War II, the Soviet Union greatly expands in huge numbers. Communism is rising all over the world. Eastern European countries join the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. The Chinese Revolution happens. There's North Korea, and communism is rising. And so the U.S. intelligence agencies are trying to fight back against it. In 1949, the CIA published a book called The God That Failed. The God That Failed. That is the name of a CIA, I've got it somewhere, a CIA anti-communist book published in 1949. And it's written by ex-communists, people who were in the Communist Party, and it didn't go well for them. And so they write their complaint. It's Richard Wright, who's an African-American writer in the United States. There was a guy who was in the German Communist Party. There's a couple other people. And they published this book, The God That Failed. That's the name of the book. It's all about how communism says it's going to create heaven on earth. Communism and the Soviet Union, they say they're going to create a perfect society, but they failed. They're the God that failed. Now think about that language, the God that failed. The God that failed. Now, what does that sound like? The God that failed, right? What's going on there? Denouncing God, denouncing the Heavenly Father, right? This is appealing to Oedipal impulses, right? Kill your parents, right? Your parents are phonies. Your parents are fraud. The God that failed. Very interesting. So then, after that, George Orwell is a British guy who was kind of a leftist, who fought with Trotskyites in Spain, had been involved in all kinds of labor union struggles. During World War II, he was hired by the British Ministry of Information to run war propaganda. And as World War II was ending, he published a book called Animal Farm. And then a few years later, he wrote a book called 1984. And those books are required reading now in American schools. Everybody reads Animal Farm, and everybody reads 1984. And 1984, I will say, is a little bit more clever. 1984 is kind of a science fiction novel about totalitarianism, but Animal Farm is just crap. Animal Farm is just utter crap. Both of them are anti-communist books. 1984 is a little bit more intense and fun, and it makes some interesting points about propaganda and stuff. So I'll give 1984 a little bit of credit. But Animal Farm is just complete crap. And Animal Farm is this novel about animals, barnyard animals who overthrow the farmer. They kill the farmer, and they start trying to create an egalitarian society in the barnyard. However, it doesn't work. And there's the pigs are the people who started the revolution. They're supposed to be the party. And it is using barnyard animals as a satire for the Russian Revolution. And there are things in Animal Farm that are evil, that are just downright evil. For example, one character in Animal Farm is Boxer the horse, and he's supposed to be the big, strong workhorse on the farm. And Boxer the horse is portrayed as stupid. He's a stupid horse. And, the pig who is like the Stalin figure is called Napoleon. And Boxer the horse is just so big and stupid. He starts the slogan, Napoleon is always right. Napoleon is always right. That's the slogan. Dumb Boxer the horse does that. Well, Boxer the horse is supposed to represent the industrial working class of Russia. Right? He's supposed to represent the people who saved humanity from fascism. He's supposed to represent the people who mobilized to build their country up into an industrial superpower, the people who invented space travel. And the way George Orwell portrays Boxer the horse is so vulgar. It's this dumb, true-believing horse who says, Napoleon is always right. It is the most vile elitism that you could ever see. But then it gets worse. So Boxer the horse gets old, and he can't work anymore because he's old. So the pigs, the party, they send him to the glue factory, and he gets turned into glue. They kill him and they turn him into glue. Now the idea is supposed to be the evil communist leaders. They worked the Russian working class to death, and then they killed them. That's not what happened. And in fact, in the Soviet Union, they took very good care of elderly people. They had a much earlier retirement age than Western countries did. They got paid vacation and a really nice pension. They didn't kill all the older people. The way older people were treated in the Soviet Union was actually pretty good. But that's not what it is. Apparently, the Russian working class were just stupid true believers. Napoleon's always right. And then the evil communist leaders sent them to the glue factory. And that just shows you how vile the propaganda is. It's hatred for the Russian people and the Russian working class, but also just lying. The life expectancy of the Russian people went up. The elderly people had amazing retirement and treatment. I mean, it just completely misrepresents the experience, right? But regardless, that's Animal Farm. And this is starting to show you that long before Stalin died, anti-communist propaganda was starting to refine itself, right? You had something called the Congress for Cultural Freedom, which was the CIA hiring leftists, communists, socialists, Trotskyites, and paying them to write leftist stuff that was against American imperialism, but also against the Soviet Union. And we'll see that. But anyway, long story short, 1956, Stalin died. Well, Stalin died in 1953, but 3 years later, they have the 20th Party Congress. And at the 20th Party Congress, Khrushchev gives the infamous secret speech, the secret speech. And the secret speech is the leader of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev, gets up and gives a tirade against Stalin. And he says everything they said about Stalin was totally true. Stalin was a dictator. Stalin was a murderer. Stalin was a selfish, tyrant, authoritarian, awful person. Now, a lot of people dispute the secret speech, and some of the contents of the secret speech are ridiculous. For example, it claims that Stalin was so scared when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union that he started crying and hid under his desk in fear. Stalin was a bank robber at one point in his life. Did you know that? Stalin would literally walk into banks with a gun. The idea that Stalin, the man of steel, was so scared when the Nazis invaded that he just started crying, that didn't happen. That was just a lie. They were trying to denigrate Stalin but here's the thing. The secret speech was very much Oedipal. Stalin had been the father of the country. Stalin had been the guy who had led them through World War II. He brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. Stalin had this parental transference role. So Khrushchev got up in front of the whole Soviet Communist Party and he killed their father. He engaged in an Oedipal murder and he killed the father of the country. Right? That has psychological value. And in the secret speech, Khrushchev introduced the phrase cult of personality. And that's what he accused Stalin of, building a cult of personality. And the speech, the secret speech, the actual name of it is On the Cult of Personality and Its Consequences. And it's all about how you should not worship individuals. You should not look up to great leaders like Stalin because that's not scientific and that's not Marxist. And you should be on guard against this deviation called the cult of personality. Right? So he commits this Oedipal act. He murders the father of the country. And then he says, we've got to not have parental transference. We've got to have the cult of personality gotten rid of. We cannot have cult of personality. This is all very, very interesting. Now, a couple years later, right, 1956, so, about 8 years later, there's a TV show in the United States. It's called The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone. And there's an episode of The Twilight Zone that is really, memorable. And the reason that it's very memorable is it's called To Serve Man. To Serve Man. And the episode of The Twilight Zone, it's basically these aliens come to the planet Earth and they're really nice. And they're feeding people and they're giving us all these medical secrets. So the human life expectancy expands and they cure cancer and they cure all these diseases. And these aliens are just really, really kind. And they're helping human beings, and they end all the wars, and they feed us, and they cure us of disease. And so the aliens, they're just so kind, and they're helping people. And they decide that they want to start taking human beings back to their home planet. And whenever they ask the aliens why they're doing all these nice things for people, they point to this book that they have called To Serve Man. To Serve Man is the name of the book. It's called To Serve Man. It's called To Serve Man. And, and it's an interesting choice of words because the Chinese Communist Party, their slogan was serve the people, right? So, the aliens who come to the planet and are giving everyone health care and feeding everybody and get rid of world hunger and triple the human life expectancy. They're so nice. And they have a little book, a little book. They have a little red book. I'm just kidding, but there was no red book at the time. But, they have this little book they always point to about why they believe in helping people. And it's called To Serve Man. To Serve Man. So at the end of the episode, the human beings are just so excited to go and visit the home planet of the aliens. They're just so excited to do it. And how does the episode end? I'm sure there's many people in the chat who've seen it before, but I'll just put it on the screen so that we can all see. This is the last 41 seconds of To Serve Man as the people are getting on the spaceship, excited to go visit the home planet of those really nice aliens who gave everyone free health care, etc. What happens?
Mr. Chambers! Mr. Chambers! Don't get on that ship! The rest of the book, To Serve Man, it's a cookbook!
No! 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 No!
It's a cookbook, right? It's a cookbook. Now, that's obviously anti-communist propaganda, because the Chinese Communist Party's slogan was serve the people, and the Soviet Union was going around the world giving people health care and education. And the idea is that if somebody is doing nice things, and if someone is offering you care and compassion and kindness, they're a fraud. They're fooling you. They're tricking you. It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook, right? Communism is the god that failed, right? They sent Boxer the horse to the glue factory. Stalin was an evil man who was building a cult of personality. And, and what is it? What is it?
Tip, the rest of the book, to serve men, it's a cookbook. It's a cookbook.
So you shouldn't believe in compassion, and you shouldn't believe in kindness, and you shouldn't, anyone who comes along trying to make your life better, anyone who's offering you parental transference, anyone who's trying to get you to believe in something, it's a cult of personality, right? It's a cult of personality. It's they're going to send you to the glue factory. It's the god that failed. It's a cookbook. Right? That's anti-communist propaganda. And this is much more effective anti-communist propaganda than has ever existed before. Prior, they just said communists are atheists. They just said communists, they don't believe in God or whatever. But this is sophisticated anti-communist propaganda. George Orwell in 1984, that stuff very much talks about nonconformity and the need to be an individual and not conform. And the God that failed, it's written by very dedicated communists who left the movement. And the secret speech, that was the head of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev. He was the head of the country, and he's up there denouncing Stalin and talking about cult of personality. All of this is appealing to leftist feelings, libidinal feelings, Oedipal feelings. Right? Your desire to go out and be independent, right? Your desire to kill your parents, your desire to unleash your rage and your sexual desires. And it's appealing to the kind of sentiments that communists appeal to and the left traditionally appeals to. And it's psyching you up against parental transference. This is all very, very interesting. So the new left comes along in the 1960s, and the new left is fake. It's not communist, and it's from the American power structure. The new left is created by the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And the new left is all about, about think for yourself. And, the Congress for Cultural Freedom is all these CIA funded intellectuals and magazines, Partisan Review, the Frankfurt School. You've also got Project MK Ultra. And Project MK Ultra is drugs. They're distributing drugs all over the country. That they distributed drugs on college campuses. There were rock concerts where there would be military airplanes that would just airdrop drugs, acid down out of planes for people to take. They would give free drugs away at these concerts. And it's the hippie counterculture. They equate the USSR with Nazi Germany. And that's a really big part of new left propaganda. That Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union are both examples of excessive democracy. If average people get out of control, if the masses of people get out of control, they'll form a mob that will threaten the freedom of intellectuals, right? And that Nazi Germany and the USSR are both totalitarian, and it's an example of the mob. It's an example of mob mentality of average people getting out of control. A big part of the new left is the generation gap, the idea that young people are superior to old people, right? And youth culture, right? The new left, the hippies used to say, don't trust anyone over 30. And it's about our generation is going to save the world. The young people, the youth fight against the old people. Rock and roll music that is very sexual and libidinal is very much emotional music about, letting your anger and your emotion and your sex drive out. Rock music is everywhere. There's also eco-Malthusianism and the idea that we need to go back to nature. Civilization is bad. We need to go back to nature. the idea that working class Americans, average working class Americans, are pigs. They're the enemy because they benefit from imperialism, because they support the government, they support the military. And then there's this weird white savior complex. The hippies all think they're the good white people that are going to align with the black people against the evil American majority, right? The American majority are a bunch of hard hat pigs, racist, but we're going to team up with an army of black people. We're going to have a race war and we're going to destroy them, right? The Weather Underground, Charles Manson, the New Left is very, very much, it is all these libidinal drives, the anger of young people at their parents, the anger of the desire to unleash your sexual impulses, the idea to unleash your anger, and it's contempt for the working class, contempt for the bulk of society, celebration of individualism. The New Left is this libidinal, Oedipal stuff on steroids, and the New Left is a war against parental transference. In fact, Jerry Rubin, who is one of the main thinkers of the New Left, is the Youth International Party, the Yippies. He would begin his speeches at college campuses. I kid you not. He would get up in front of the microphone and he would shout, "Kill your parents! Kill your parents!" Right? And I mean, it was very blatant what they were doing. It was very much unleashing people's Oedipal impulses, unleashing people's libidinal impulses, and psyching them up against parental transference. So now we live in a society where basically, as a mechanism of social control, they have amped up all of our libidinal and Oedipal desires. And the lockdowns were very useful for doing so, because during the lockdowns, we couldn't get together with other people. We were isolated from each other, right? And so it was very, very hard to have a collective sense. We were all at home and isolated. And while we were at home and isolated, what were we doing during the pandemic? We were looking at social media. Social media became the medium through which we all connected with each other. And so the algorithms that are very carefully controlled got to dictate how we interact with each other. They became the middleman to define our social interactions. And the big tech monopolies, through their control of the algorithms, decided what went viral and what didn't. And they got to regulate how we interacted with each other. And so now the Oedipal desire to destroy and rebel is amped up. Meanwhile, due to our economy and the lack of good paying jobs, the gig economy, the service sector economy, many adults are stuck living as permanent teenagers. They don't have the dignity of adulthood, of going out and having their own home and paying their own bills and having children of their own and getting married. They're stuck living with their parents as semi-permanent teens, right? And so obviously, if you're still living with your parents as an adult, you're going to have Oedipal feelings, right? Meanwhile, television and media has amped up our libidinal desires. TV and media is all about sex and it's all about violence. Lots of violent movies, lots of pornography. You can get pornography on your phone. Every ad has naked bodies on it. You know, they are pumping you with sex and violence and libido all the time. Meanwhile, many young people are stuck living with their parents. They're telling you to never trust any leader, never trust any movement, because if you do, you're in a cult, you're brainwashed, you got to be on guard against parental transference. So we live in a society where basically we are being pumped full of libidinal sex and violence all the time. And we're also having our suspicion and fear of authority and our resentment toward our parents and our resentment toward anyone who would tell us what's right and wrong amped up at all times. We are taught to have very short attention spans, not to learn political concepts, but to just have our emotions appealed to, right? So is it any surprise that we're having a widespread mental health crisis? Of course not. Anybody in this circumstance, if you're having your natural attraction to sex and violence amped up constantly, if you're constantly being told to rebel and to be suspicious of any institution that would tell you right and wrong exists and anything that seems like a parental figure, you're going to lose your mind, right? That they have tapped into our Oedipal and our libidinal impulses, and they have amped them up to a level that is causing society-wide insanity. And that's why the suicide rate is massive. That's why the drug addiction rate is massive. That's why many people are isolated and atomized. They talked about there was a trend in Japan of these young guys who never went outside, right? They never went outside, and they didn't know how to have real connections with other people. And that we have really developed a society where people are atomized, isolated individuals who are being constantly manipulated by social media, who are constantly having their edible and libidinal desires amped up, who have short attention spans. This is like a perfect recipe for a suicide epidemic, for a mental health epidemic, for a drug epidemic. I mean, we have been mind fucked. Okay. So if you have a mental health issue, you should not feel ashamed. Okay. And I will just say that, right? If you have a mental health issue, you shouldn't feel ashamed, because how could you not go insane in a society like this? Anyone who is subject to this level of social atomization, to this level of pornographication, etc., is going to go crazy. And I mean, it makes sense that our young people are going crazy, because everything is being done to psychologically manipulate them to lose their minds. And mental illness is being used as a form of social control. And this is what I talked about, the Atlanticist pathology. So anyway, that leads me to demagogy. All right. What is demagogy? Demagogy is political. This is the definition, the dictionary.com definition. Demagogy is political activity or practices that seek support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than using rational argument. And basically, demagogy is where they don't teach you anything. They just appeal to your emotions, right? And demagogy is not helpful because you don't learn anything. Demagogues just tap into how you already feel, prejudices that you already have, desires or feelings that you already have, and they just amp them up for their own gain. And the best example of demagogy that I've been able to come across recently is the definitions of capitalism. What is capitalism? Well, every example, every definition that you will get from people is not a definition. It is simply an appeal to their emotions. If you talk to people on the right, you ask conservatives, what is capitalism? They'll say, capitalism is when I own my own business and I get to do things without the government taxing me. That's not what capitalism is, right? You ask leftists what capitalism is. Capitalism is when rich people have all the money and poor people get screwed. That's not what capitalism is. Right? What is capitalism? Capitalism is when the government works for private corporations. That is not what capitalism is. Capitalism is when I get to have a lot of money and go shopping at the store. That is not what capitalism is. Whether you're on the left who think capitalism is good, or whether you're on the right that thinks capitalism is good and thinks capitalism is everything they like having money, like having their own business, like having financial independence, not paying taxes. Whether you're on the left and thinks capitalism is bad, it's inequality, it's injustice, it's greed. None of those are a definition of capitalism, because the people telling them what capitalism is are demagogues. They're not teaching them anything. They're just appealing to their emotions. And if you want to like capitalism, capitalism is everything you like. If you want to hate capitalism, it's everything you don't like. But no one's actually teaching what capitalism is. What is capitalism? Capitalism is when the means of production function according to profit. Capitalism is the anarchy of production. It is the chaos of the market. It is profits in command. That's what capitalism is. Capitalism is a system where the banks and the factories and the industries are privately owned and operated to maximize profits for those who own them. That's an actual definition, and I'm teaching you something. Capitalism is not feudalism. Capitalism is not socialism. Capitalism is not hunter-gatherer civilization. Capitalism is a system where the means of production only function as preliminary transformation into capital. I'm teaching you something. I'm awakening you. I'm teaching you. I'm helping you to learn to think. Right? Whereas everyone else who says capitalism is not paying taxes, capitalism is having money, capitalism is income inequality, capitalism is greed, everyone else is just demagoguing to you. Whereas I'm actually teaching you what capitalism is. I'm teaching you to think. I'm helping you to understand the nature of reality, and everyone else is just appealing to your emotions. And that is the difference between demagogy and real politics. We engage in real politics at the Center for Political Innovation. Now, Wallace Wattles, who was a socialist, who was a friend of Eugene Debs, he said this, and I'm going to read this as a long quote, but it's very, very important about what it means to be a revolutionary activist. He said, "The more you talk and think about your hard times, the more you will be inclined to seek some mental narcotic to dull the keen edge of your suffering, and the longer you will suffer. No surer way to keep the masses poor can be devised than to continually write and talk about their poverty. Talk about the good time coming. The good time is coming. And the rapidity of its coming is the exact proportion to the number of people who think about it and talk about it. Instead of going about showing horrible pictures of the conditions of those who live in tenements, go about showing beautiful pictures of the conditions of those who will live in the coming city. If you can inspire one person to go out and work for the coming city, you have done more good than you can by sending out 10 people with slaves and plasterers to relieve existing distress. Instead of crusading against child labor and bad factory conditions, tell the working people what splendid conditions they will have when they wake up and begin to operate the industries for themselves. The masses are not in bondage to anything but ignorance and intellectual laziness, and they can have what they will if they will begin to think. Our job is not to go out and get everyone mad about how much the world sucks. Not our job. Our job is not to go out and get everyone sad about how unfair the world is. Our job is to go out and inspire people to be creative, to understand that with their creativity, they could improve the world. And that if we awakened and if we stopped living biologically and we rationally organized our economy, we could make the world a better place. We could stamp our will upon nature, the very definition of what it means to be a human being. Our job is to get people to think, not to feel, but to think. Our job is to awaken people to think and understand how if we asserted our willpower, if we stopped just going through life following whatever the algorithm says, if we asserted our willpower, we could make the world a better place. Our job as revolutionaries is to inspire people to think. To think. That is what our job is. Our job is to inspire people to think. If you're going to be a revolutionary activist, you must stay engaged. The first thing you must do is you must examine your own motivations and your own subconscious. You need to know what drives you. Furthermore, you cannot be atomized. You need to connect with other people. You need to be in a revolutionary organization. And I know that doesn't make me popular. That's one of the main reasons that I think people don't watch this channel, is I am not here to just entertain you. I am here to tell you, you got to get involved. You need to join the Center for Political Innovation. You need to join the movement, right? And you need to get involved in the struggle to build a better world, and that you will not be happy just passively watching and consuming content. You need to get involved. You must stay engaged and not withdraw. Often when people are feeling in a negative way, when things don't go their way, their response is to just pull back, to quit, to isolate. And if you do that, it's only going to get worse. You need to stay engaged. You need to resist gangster aesthetics. Right? Our culture is Oedipal and libidinal, and we need rational thinking, and we also need parental transference. There's an urgent need for parental transference in our society. But anyhow, these are ways you can combat the Atlanticist pathology in daily life. First, you can do regular outreach to strangers. right? Penny is a great example of that. Penny, in the lead up to the Minneapolis workshop, she talked to her coworkers about it. She talked to people in her neighborhood about it. She's constantly going out and talking to people that aren't in our political circles about what we believe and engaging with them and asking them what they think and what their opinion is. Don't live in a bubble. Don't let your phone decide who it is that you get to listen to. Don't let them convince you that you can only speak to people that are in your circles, right? You very much need to speak to average people, speak to people in your neighborhood, speak to your coworkers, speak to people you don't know. Don't live in a bubble. Next, this is a weird one, but it's done wonders for me. Listen before you go to sleep at night, every night, to classical music. And when you wake up in the morning, before you go about your day, listen to classical music. Start your day every day with classical music. Why? Because classical music has a less emotional appeal. If you listen to Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, if you listen to a lot of music, traditional music from Asia, traditional music from different parts of the world, it's not inspiring you in a libidinal way. It is rather appealing to rationality. Your mind is paying attention to patterns in the music rather than just getting amped up emotionally. A lot of our music nowadays amps you up emotionally, right? It amps you up, gets you fired up, it's passionate. But if you listen to Bach, right? If you listen to Beethoven, Mozart, it does the opposite. Your mind starts paying attention to patterns, and that is a much healthier way to think. And it helps you kind of get control and kind of smooth over the crazy libidinal culture that we have. In addition to that, get some icons, right? I told you that, in the Russian Orthodox Church, they had icons of saints that they looked up to. Well, find people from history that you look up to, great revolutionary leaders, great people, and get a picture of them and have that picture on display and talk to that person and imagine that person in your life. Explain to that person what you are trying to do. Consult that person in your mind, right? Help that person become your super ego, right? That's a really, really important thing to do. Get a picture. If you like Hugo Chavez, get a picture of Hugo Chavez. If you like Stalin, get a picture of Stalin. If you like Roosevelt or Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X, get a picture of them, right? If you like Rosa Luxemburg, get a picture of her and put that icon in your bedroom, put that icon in your living room and talk to it and imagine talking to that person and explaining to that person what you're doing and tell that person about the revolutionary activities that you're engaging in. Tell them what you're doing. Put that person into your mind. Have that person become your superego, become your conscience, become the voice that you consult. Think, what would I do, right? If your hero is Martin Luther King, think, well, what would Martin Luther King think? And have a picture of Martin Luther King in your home and imagine explaining to Martin Luther King what it is that you're doing and what he might say about it, right? You want to actively develop a superego, and having icons is a great way to do it. Another thing to do is to keep a dream journal, because in dreams, your subconscious and suppressed feelings can come across. You may have anger you're not aware of. You may have sadness or painful feelings you're not aware of. And in your dreams, you can catch, subconscious feelings. They kind of drip through in your dreams. Another thing to do is to memorize. Memorize phrases and mantras and chant them. On these streams, we have certain phrases that we say over and over again. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Say whatever your mantra is over and over and over again. Have certain phrases that you repeat to yourself until you know them, right? Until they become part of you. Phrases that can give you power. Phrases that can draw strength. Maybe long ones that you memorize and recite to yourself over and over and over again, right? Revolution is the main trend in the world today. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. There you go. I can do it one more time. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. That's a mantra, and it gives you strength. The other thing is keep your word. If you decide to do something, do it. Keep your word to others and keep your word to yourself. If you promise yourself that you are going to go to the gym, go to the gym. If you promise yourself that you are going to vacuum the living room, vacuum the living room. If you promise your friend that you're going to go visit their grandma with them on Friday night, go and visit their grandma with them on Friday night. Because every time you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you disappoint yourself. And you may not be aware of it, right? You may think, I didn't feel like getting up today and going to the gym. I didn't feel like vacuuming the living room. But every time you say that you're going to do something to a friend or to yourself and you don't do it, you hate yourself. Part of you becomes disappointed in yourself. You let yourself down and your self-esteem decreases. I am being dead honest with you. And you have less confidence and it gets you closer to living biologically, right? When you say, I am going to vacuum the living room, when you make that decision and then you go out and vacuum the living room, you are asserting your will onto reality. You're asserting your humanity. And when you don't, you've disappointed yourself. When you say to your friend, I am going to go visit your grandma with you on Friday, and you, on Friday, you get up and you go and visit your grandma with them on Friday, you are asserting your humanity. You are asserting your will. You're not living biologically. So if you say you're going to do something, do it. I'm dead serious. And if you don't, you are disappointing yourself. Now, we can't help it. Obviously, we don't do what we say we're going to do. But you should make a conscious effort that if you decide I am going to do something, unless something really big happens or unless it's just not possible, you do it. You want to live true to your word, not just so that you're reliable, right? So that people who work with you know that you mean what you say and you say what you mean. You earn their respect, but you earn your own respect. You remind yourself of your own power, right? Every time you make a commitment to do something and you do it, you are saying to yourself, I am powerful. You are empowering yourself, right? And you become stronger. And you become more aware of your humanity. You become less of a living biologically entity. You become less of a plant. You become less of a dog or a rat. You become more of a human. So it's really, really important that you do what you say you're going to do. And on top of that, you've got to stay engaged. You must make every effort not to isolate. When something doesn't go well, when you feel like the world sucks, reach out, talk to people, connect with other people. Because if you isolate, it will only get worse. You must stay engaged and you must connect with other people. And this is a daily battle. It is very hard. It is very hard to stay on the revolutionary road, and it is not easy. It is not easy to go back to stay away from just living biologically. It is a daily battle. But if you're going to be a revolutionary, you need to do it. But you need other people. You need other people who can be with you, because it's a lot easier when you're in an organization. It is a lot easier when you have comrades and friends and people you can trust and people who you can look up to and people who will be patient with you if you make a mistake, and people who will forgive you if you do something wrong, and people who will teach you things you didn't hear or didn't know, or will show you things from a different perspective. It's very, very important to stay engaged and connected, even when it's difficult, because they are doing everything they can in our society to make us isolated and atomized individuals. And it is a daily, constant battle to stay on the revolutionary road and not be reduced to living biologically. And it's not easy, and it's difficult, and they are using insanity as a mechanism of social control. They want us all to be insane, right? They want us all to be insane so they can control us. And you have to assert your humanity. You have to think, you have to awaken, and you have to connect with others so that we can change the world and fight to defeat globalism, imperialism. And that is my message for you all tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, why don't we do the roll call, names and locations, then I'll answer people's questions. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Bob in Troy, New York is with us. Welcome, Bob. Jacob in Wisconsin is with us. Names and locations. Who is with us? Jenny in Cincinnati. Sarah in Oregon. Ed in Louisville. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Patch in Arizona. Ian Chester in England. Mariah in North Carolina. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Ellie from Chicago, JT24 in Mississippi, Scott in Maryland, Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Viking Dave. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Maddie in California. Welcome, Maddie. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Nikki in Canada. Anthony in Detroit. Welcome. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Jim in Chicago. Welcome, Jim. Good to have you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Anybody else? We got Alex and Susan from Montreal, Quebec. Perth from Western Australia. Patrick in Maine. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Ryan in Kansas City. Welcome, Ryan. Good to have you with us. Anybody else? Names and locations. I'm here tonight and in your heart. Colin in Greensboro. Very, very good. Well, listen, folks, I do want to take this time to quickly remind you that we're having the biggest event that CPI has ever had. It'll be in Chicago. And it is going to be our convention that is coming up this summer. I need you there. It is going to be, if you go to one event this year, come to our convention in Chicago. Working families first, defeat the deep state, embrace a new world of peace and innovation. Everything we talked about will be on full display at the convention. We need you there. Elliot in Texas. Very, very good. We need you there. So register down below. You got plenty of time. July 12th is a long way away. We need you to join us at the convention in Chicago. It will be the most important event of the year. It will be the flagship anti-imperialist event of the year. And we need you to be there. We need you to attend because it's going to be absolutely awesome. It's going to be absolutely awesome. So I'm going to put on some music at this point. But you know what would be neat? Would be if people told me in super chats what they thought of tonight's conversation. I would be very interested in what people thought, because this is a lot of new material. Right? This is stuff I haven't really talked about before. So I'm going to put on a couple songs, but people should tell me in super chats what they think of this, because this is all kind of new material. We got Deha in Deha in Seattle. I want to make sure I say his name right. Sometimes I say Dahe, and it's not Dahe, it's Deha. Deha in Seattle is watching. There's a good crew of people here. We've got 2 Rumble rants, but if people want to just tell me in their super chats what they thought of this new material tonight, that'd be great. So first, I'm going to put on The Banks of Marble.
I've traveled around this country from shore to shining shore. It really made me wonder the things I heard and saw. I saw the weary farmer a-plowing sod and loam. I heard the auction hammer just a-knocking down his home. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door, and the vaults are stuffed with silver that the farmer sweated for. I saw the seamen standing idly by the shore. I heard their bosses saying, got no work for you no more. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door, and the vaults are stuffed with silver that the seamen sweated for. I saw the weary miner scrubbing coal dust from his back. I heard his children crying, got no coal to heat the shack. But the banks are made of marble with a guard at every door, and the vaults are stuffed with silver that the miners sweated for. I've seen my brothers working throughout this mighty land. I prayed we'd get together and together make a stand. Then we'd own those banks of marble with no guard at any door, and we'd share those vaults of silver that we sweated for.
All right, so that was kind of a slow version of the classic communist song, The Banks of Marble. So I'm going to put on, this is a version of the song Eye of the Tiger that I found. You know, Eye of the Tiger was an 80s song from one of the Rocky movies. This is a woman who did it as a jazz. She did like a jazz cover of the Eye of the Tiger.
Rising up, back on the street, I did my time, took my chances. Went the distance, I'm back on my feet, just a man and his will to survive. So many times it happens so fast, you trade your passion for glory. Don't lose your grip on the dreams of the past. You must fight just to keep them alive. It's the eye of the of our rival, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night. He's watching us all with the eye of the tiger, eye of the tiger. Face to face, out in the heat, hanging tough, staying hungry. They'll stack the odds till we take to the street for the kill with the skill to survive. It's the eye of the tiger, it's the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of our rival, and the last known survivor stalks his prey in the night. He's watching us all with the eye of the tiger, eye of the tiger. Watch out. Eye of the tiger.
So that was fun. Now, so we have one super chat that came in. Lionel gave his opinion, and I will read that. And we have 2 Rumble rants that have come in. So I'm going to put on some more music. My goal tonight is to have 5 people send a super chat of some size to give me their reaction to what they heard. That was quite a presentation I did tonight about the Atlanticist pathology, about how to stay on the revolutionary road. I'd like 5 people, if possible. We've already got 1, so 4 more people to tell me what they thought of the presentation, what parts of it spoke to them. That would be very, very helpful if 5 more people could send a super chat with their thoughts. That would be good. Feedback is always appreciated. So I'm going to put on one more song while we do that. If we could get 4 more super chats or Rumble rants about that, I will start answering questions. I'm going to put on another piece of music. Again, it's Saturday night, and I know there's a lot of people that really like this Cuban song. This is a very much a national song of Cuba, Guantanamera. It's revolutionary, but it's also kind of a salsa song. So we're going to put on this song of the Cuban people, Guantanamera. If a few more people can send super chats of what they thought, we'll go from there. So as you can see, I just used the goal creation mechanism. Shout out to Peter Coffin, who advised me to set the goal of I want to get 5 more super chats in the next 30 minutes. And if I can get the 5 more super chats, I will play the song Guantanamera again. That is the goal. So within the next half hour, 30 minutes, we can get 5 more super chats. I will play Guantanamera, the song you all just heard, once again. That is what we will do. So, you know, I really do want to hear what people thought of the opening remarks tonight, because I'd wanted to talk about this kind of thing for a while. The slideshows are a new format that we have done. You know, and a lot of people like the slideshows that we're doing. We had a great meeting of CPI this afternoon. It was really, really awesome. You know, it was really, really great. We had, I think 23 people that were there this afternoon. It was really, really beautiful. We have a real serious organization. We have a great organization that we are building. And it's really, really inspiring. I know Peter is working on another video of the workshop we had in Minneapolis with narration from Gabby and from Penny. It's really going to be great. And we're doing this. We're building our organization. I did want to let you know, if you're in the LA area, if you're in Los Angeles, come to our workshop that we are doing on the 19th of April. Dan Niswander out in LA is working hard to make that workshop a success. They just had an LA meeting. It's going to be a great, great workshop out in LA. So, you know, I'm hoping that we can have a successful workshop. We just had a great one in Minneapolis. You know, we got another super chat. So we're approaching our goal, right? We got 1 more super chat, right? So do I have to push something? Right? Right? How does this work? I made the goal, right? And so then, right, do I have to like push something, or like, what do I have to do? Right? I'm happy we got the goal. That was 1 out of 5. Like, okay. All right. Well, I don't quite know how these things work, but we're 4 more super chats. And, I see. It has to be $5 and up, right, for it to count. That's why it was, that's how it works. I've never set a goal before on here. I never have set a goal. So there we go. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie, for that. So yeah, we do have a couple Rumble rants to answer. But before we do that, I guess since we're playing music and we're trying to reach our goal of having people tell me what they thought of the opening remarks and my thoughts on that, we will play 1 more song. Why not? This is a song from a video game that became kind of a favorite of mine. The Bugaloo Boys, which are a gun rights organization, they adopted it as their own. It's from the video game Far Cry 5, and which is like a fictionalized version of the Waco massacre or whatever. And they wrote this song, Keep Your Rifle by Your Side, which now gun rights activists have adopted as their own. So here is a woman doing her own cover performance of it. So if people have more super chats, and then we'll just start answering them when we're ready. Our goal is to get 5 more super chats of $5 or more. So let's see if we can do it.
They'll look high and they'll look low. They'll look everywhere we go. But when the sinners find us, we won't hide. They'll come loud and they'll come fast. We shoot first and we can last. Keep your rifle by your side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, oh Lord, this simple life just ain't enough. So we'll take a stand, for we must protect our land. Keep your rifle by your side. They'll come day and they'll come night. They'll have our children in their sights. But if they don't have faith, their eyes are blind. They can scream and they can shout. They can never smoke us out. Keep your rifle by your side. Singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us. Singing, 'cause they've got money in their ranks. But we won't fall as long as we can fight. They'll go on to preach their hate, but they won't get past the gate. Keep your rifle by your side, singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us, singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. When I see your face, I know I must protect my place. I'll keep my rifle by my side, singing, oh Lord, this earth was made for us, singing, oh Lord, this sinful life just ain't enough. When I see your face, I know I must protect my place. I'll keep my rifle by my side. Keep my rifle by my side. Keep your rifle by your side.
I love that song. I really, really do. And again, it's from a video game. Oh, okay. We got Miss Ritchie. That's one super chat, and I think that counts toward our goal. So we 4 more super chats of $5 or more, and we will have reached our goal. But now I better start answering questions, or else I'm going to get ahead of myself. So first, Rumble Rant. Hempcar says, that's funny they accuse China of using people. Thomas Barnett was in a documentary on RT. In his speech on C-SPAN, he said, wolves should hunt down the retired and will be eating Soylent Green. Ugh. Soylent Green is a weird movie from the 70s that is also a Malthusian movie. It's about overpopulation. It's kind of an it's about climate change, but it's also kind of anti-corporate, right? It's against like powerful corporations. It's a weird sci-fi movie from the 70s, which honestly, I recommend. It's a little pessimistic and dark, but it's Charlton Heston is the hero. And it's this kind of like futuristic corporate world. I will say it's very much an eco-Malthusian film. Overpopulation is a big theme in it, etc. But yeah, it's I like some of those sci-fi movies. Charlton Heston also made a movie called The Last Man on Earth, The Omega Man. And that was, it was an interpretation of I Am Legend, right? There's a sci-fi vampire story from the 50s. It was a novel called I Am Legend. Basically, it's a nuclear war happens, and human beings, that are left all have a disease that makes them vampires. And there's one normal person left who's not a vampire, and he's like, he goes out during the day and then he barricades himself in his house at night. So there's many versions of the film. There's one with Will Smith that was made more recently. There's one that was made in the with Vincent Price, but the one that I recommend the most is called The Omega Man, and it stars Charlton Heston, and it's made in the early 70s. And it is very much a Nixon conservative response to the New Left, right? It is very much, he's a Nixon conservative, and the vampires are the New Left. And he's an old conservative who hates the New Left. And I would recommend that. Don't agree with the film, obviously, but it's very much a conservative. The vampires, they're not just vampires in this version. They're a weird religion. They worship a prophet named Matthias, and they're against technology, and they smash technology. There's a racial angle to the film. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's actually, if you watch I Am Legend, it's probably the most interesting version of or if you watch The Omega Man, it's the most interesting version of the I Am Legend story from the 50s. So I would recommend that. Yeah, and Soylent Green, yeah, it's an okay movie. It's fun to watch. I don't agree with it again, and it's very much a Malthusian. Oh, Peter also jumped in. He made a movie again and called it right, Gran Torino, about an old man. Right, I get it. That's funny. Gran Torino is a different kind of movie, but yeah, now we're almost towards our goal, right? We're at what? We're at 2 out of 5. So if 3 more people give us a super chat of $5 or more, we will have reached our goal. So there you go. I've never done the goal thing before, but there we go. All right. Well, I'm going to start answering super chat questions now. I'm really requesting that people give me feedback on the opening segment I did tonight, how to stay on the revolutionary road, the PowerPoint, the slideshow that we did tonight, because I feel like that PowerPoint slideshow has a lot of important content in it. We are publishing a new book shortly. Innovationism is really taking off. I don't know if you saw, there was a libertarian podcast yesterday. I did not see this coming. I have no idea who these people are. It was published last night. Caleb Maupin's Concept of Innovationism. And I listened to like some of it, about the first half, and I was like, dang, they really don't quite understand what I'm trying to promote, but they decided to do a whole podcast about innovationism. We at the Center for Political Innovation, we are killing it. We are killing it. We are marching forward. Innovationism is the future. It is really, really the future. And we are pioneering a new way to build an organization. Shout out to John McCarthy, who is a leader of our organization in Chicago. He is headed to the Uhuru Movement's National Convention that is happening next weekend, and he will be representing us and giving our solidarity statement to the Uhuru Movement's National Convention that they are doing. We support the Uhuru Movement. From the moment they got raided by the FBI, we stood with Chairman O'Malley. We stood with Jesse Neville and Penny Hess and the Uhuru Three. And that relationship didn't end when their trial and sentencing ended. We are still standing with them. And I'm really honored that John McCarthy will be representing us at that convention. Shout out to you, John. My hat off to you. I salute you, good sir, good comrade. And we've got an article on our website we just published. Look, we are all about building an alliance, right? We had Milhan Stevens from the Unification Church. He came on this channel. We talked about how they are under attack. They are under attack in Japan. And so we stand with them against their repression because they want peace on the Korean Peninsula. We also stood with the Uhuru Movement. We stand with people, right? We're not concerned. We're not competitive. 16 minutes left on the goal. Will we make it? Will we make it? But we're not competitive. We want to build an anti-monopoly coalition. Here we go. All right. Very, very good. Very, very good. We're almost there. We're one super chat away from reaching our goal. And then I have to play Guantanamera again. So there we go. All right. If one more comes in, then we go. So Lionel says, I really enjoyed it. Interesting, informative, and the end left me feeling inspired. Motivates me to get back to running and follow through with the attempts to quit smoking. There you go. Well, if you quit smoking, your sense of being a human will increase. You will feel powerful as a result of that. And that's the whole point of the presentation, was that it's about the fact that as human beings, we are struggling to assert our will onto the world and not live biologically. Right? Living biologically is being asleep, and we are struggling to assert our humanity. But, Lionel, the best way to quit smoking is to have a lot of friends and other people who will encourage you to quit smoking, right? You weren't meant to quit smoking in isolation. You were meant to achieve your goals with comrades. The most important thing is having people in your life. In isolation, you're not going to do well. You will succumb to the cultural insanity that we are living under. It is with comrades that you will succeed. If there's anything that is important, it is having comrades. It is having an organization. You need connection. You need connection. Now, Craig says, great content. Caleb, well taught. I will go over this again to strengthen my understanding. Looking at the current left, not quite sure what I'm looking at, but yeah, well, exactly, and that our movement, right, innovationism, is a unique movement. Like, I have spent my entire adult life in communist groups, and no one's got more communist street cred than me, right? I have gone to international communist gatherings. I have written books about communism. But if we were just doing the 20th century Marxism-Leninism thing, we wouldn't be able to teach you any of the stuff we're teaching you. We are pioneering new trail. We are at a turning point, and we are innovationists. And the innovationist movement has taken the good from communism and marched forward. Whereas what you call the new left or the left has taken the bad from communism, the libidinal impulses, the vengeance, and they've left all the good. And we are pioneering a new movement, a movement that is constructive, optimistic, that is about celebrating the human spirit and stamping our will onto history. That is what innovationism is all about. And we are marching ahead, and innovationism is a concept that is inspiring people. Look, there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. And for a long time, staying communists was a shortcut, right? We would have events and different communist groups would speak at it and all that. There's no shortcuts. We need to build a real movement to recruit people who would never go looking for these ideas, to pioneer new trail. And we have an understanding that is very unique and speaks to our times. Long live innovationism. Long live innovationism. All right, we're one $5 super chat away from reaching our goal. If we reach the goal, we will play Guantanamera one more time. I'm glad you liked the content, Craig. You know, and yeah, the slideshows. We have a PowerPoint, or I'm sorry, we have a playlist of all this slideshows that we've done. And the slideshow format, people are liking it. It's a way to get concepts across in a very organized way. I've been writing a lot. I didn't stream the last couple nights because I was writing. You know, I you know, the weather is changing, and you know, I've had colds and different things, but I also just have been writing, and I've been reading too. Right. You know, I want to learn. I'm constantly looking to learn. So I had a few new books, and I've been reading, and, you know, I've got a couple book projects, you know, in the next week or so, there'll be a couple books. You know, there's one book that'll be out next week. It's a very short piece about innovationism that's going to be out next week. It's really important that it's published. We got that coming out next week. And then we got a longer piece about Khrushchevism and the secret speech and a lot of things. That's in the works as well. I'm constantly learning, and I really love my life. I'll just tell you that. You know, the ability to be an anti-imperialist, the ability to engage with all of you, the ability to wrangle with these big questions and build an organization is really a privilege, right? It's really a privilege. And I view it as really an honor to be able to get on here and share what we are doing, this project of building a revolutionary organization, spreading anti-imperialism with all of you. I view it as really a privilege. So thank you for all being here. I'm glad I can share my work with you. I'm really glad that I can share my work and my life with all of you, because it is really an honor and a privilege to do so. So we're one super chat away from reaching our goal. And if we reach the goal, we will play Guantanamera one more time. So there we go. All right. One super chat away from reaching the goal. Will we be able to do it? Will we be able to do it? All right. So the next one, Charlie says, great talk, play Guantanamera with lyrics. Well, I don't know the lyrics. They're in Spanish, right? It's a Spanish language song. But we need one more super chat of $5 or more in order to pull it off. So 10 minutes left, as Peter is pointing out. So thank you. Thank you very much, Charlie. All right. Did you see Tucker's interview with the Prime Minister of Qatar? Amazingly, much of the left is attacking him for speaking to the enemy. Oh, boy. Well, you know, the Qatari monarchy, right? They are the main funders of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? Along with Turkey. And they want to negotiate with Iran. They are anti-Iran. They are pro-imperialist. And the Qatari monarchy is quite conservative. Right? It's very much an Islamist conservative government, but they are more secular Sunnis, right? They are Sunnis that are not, they're not Wahhabis. They are more secular Sunnis. And they, unlike Saudi Arabia, which has historically been quite hostile to Iran, Qatar is in favor of negotiations, the Qatari monarchy. And they fund the Muslim Brotherhood, whereas the Saudis tend to fund Wahhabis. They hate the Muslim Brotherhood. The Wahhabis and the Wahhabis are the conservative Sunnis. The Muslim Brotherhood are the westernized Sunnis, and Iran is Shia. Those are generally the three axes or axes in the Middle East and in Islam. Right? You have the Muslim Brotherhood, which is Muslims that are very much in love with the West. They believe in the free market. They tend to represent merchants and small business owners. They oppose nationalism because Islam as a religion can unite everybody. And they very much believe that the West is like successful because it's true to Islamic principles. They will say things like, you know, in America, we have battered women's shelters, and in the time of the Prophet Muhammad built battered women's shelters. So, and that they believe in the free market, they believe in technology. They're westernized Muslims, right? That's the Muslim Brotherhood, Sunnis, and that's what Ilhan Omar is. That's what Rashida Tlaib is. They're westernized Sunnis. Then you have Wahhabis, and Wahhabis are from Saudi Arabia. They are very conservative. They believe in absolute monarchy. They want to go back to the Prophet. Many of them will only eat with 3 fingers because it's said that the Prophet Muhammad ate with 3 fingers. Right? They Wahhabis, Salafis, Takfiris, sometimes they're called, and they are very, very conservative. And that's the terrorists. That's ISIS. That's Al Qaeda. Not all Wahhabis are terrorists, right? There's many Saudi Muslims that just believe in Wahhabi stuff that aren't terrorists, but the terrorists are Wahhabis. Well, there we go. 1 in a million, right? There we go. And we reached our goal. So I have to play Guantanamera again. The goal has been reached. So thank you, 1 in a million. And we will certainly play Guantanamera again. But yeah, those are Wahhabis that are very, very conservative. And that's ISIS, Al Qaeda, but also just a lot of Saudi, Muslims. And then you have Shia Islam, which is a different current, which is the followers of the imams that has kind of a revolutionary edge because of the Islamic Revolution. But anyway, we reached our goal. So I have to play Guantanamera again. That was my commitment. Thank you for helping us reach our goal. I will answer the rest of the super chats after I fulfill my promise. We achieved our goal and we reached our goal. So now we will play Guantanamera again. Okay, so that was awesome. I'm glad we reached our goal. We did have a request for a Victor Jara song. So I don't know that many Victor Jara songs. I do know El Pueblo Unido, right? That is a Victor Jara song, right? The people united will never be defeated. All right. Let me see if I can find I enjoyed the Cornelius Cardew version of it, I'll be honest, but I can't seem to find a recording of it. So I think I will put on The People United Will Never Be Defeated, which is a song by Victor Jara. Victor Jara was a Chilean socialist who was killed in the 1973 coup with Pinochet. And he was a leftist, was a socialist, and he wrote a lot of Latin American leftist songs that are kind of iconic. The one that I can think of off the top of my head is El Pueblo Unido. The People United Will Never Be Defeated. So let me find a version of that I can get away with playing, right? You got to be careful with this kind of thing, because if you play the wrong recording, you can get your channel taken down. So I can't play like a mainstream recording of it. I have to play somebody performing it themselves. I think I can, that's, I'm trying to find a version of El Pueblo Unido that I can play. Right. Let me just find it. It's a very popular revolutionary Chilean song, and it just became like a leftist song in Latin America. The People United Will Never Be Defeated. I think I can probably get away with playing this version. So let me just put this version on. But yeah, we reached our goal, and that's awesome. And yeah, there you go. Thanks everybody for helping us reach our goal. And I will respond to every super chat like I always do. But yeah, let's do it. We'll put on, we had a request for a Victor Jara song. So Victor Jara wrote, El Pueblo Unido Jamás será vencido, or The People United Will Never Be Defeated, which is a chant. You hear that at protests. The people united will never be defeated. Well, this is El Pueblo Unido Jamás será vencido. The People United Will Never Be Defeated by Victor Jara.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. De pie cantar que vamos a triunfar. Avanzan ya banderas de unidad y tú vendrás marchando junto a mí y así verás tu canto y tu bandera florecer, la luz de un rojo amanecer anuncia ya la vida que vendrá. De pie luchar, el pueblo va a triunfar, será mejor la vida que vendrá a conquistar nuestra felicidad y en un clamor mil voces de combate se alzarán, dirán canción de libertad, con decisión la patria vencerá. Y ahora el pueblo que se alza en la lucha con voz de gigante gritando adelante. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. La patria está forjando la unidad, de norte a sur se movilizará, desde el salar ardiente y mineral al bosque austral, unidos en la lucha y el trabajo irán, la patria cubrirán.
Yeah, that would be a great one if you could learn it, Peter. There are English lyrics that stand up and fight, for victory will come. So yeah, I think it would be a great one, right? Anyhow, let's continue. Gran Torino. I saw that movie. That's not Charlton Heston. That one, the old angry man, is Clint Eastwood in that movie. And he makes friends with his Asian neighbors and fights the gang. That's what that movie's about. But yes, angry old man who's walled up in his house and has lots of guns. It's similar to the Omega Man. Yeah. And it's funny because it's like when you said that, I almost thought maybe Charlton Heston had been the actor in Gran Torino, but that's Clint Eastwood. But they have a similar persona of like angry old man who's gonna fight the hippies, right? And that's the character in the movie. Right? So there you go. This lecture and the Liberalism versus Government Action video are on point and apropos to our era. Great work. Well, I'm really glad to hear that. We're trying to have new analysis, right? If we just did the standard ML thing, we'd be stuck in the past, right? ML is really important. You should all read ML. You should understand ML. There would be no anti-imperialist world. There'd be no modern Russia. There'd be no modern China. There'd be no Cuba without ML. ML is the foundation. It's important, but the world has changed. So on the foundation of ML, we're moving toward innovationism, which is in line with what is happening around the world, which is a break. We're not tied to the new left. But we're also not pro-imperialist, and we're not breaking with anti-imperialism. We understand the economic foundations of imperialism and the problems of capitalism. Innovationism is the new stage. We are innovationists, and and we just have to be that. And it's we're not trying to sell you a commodified identity of being a communist. We are trying to build a movement. Right. So there we go. So I'm really glad. There is a PowerPoint, a playlist of all the things. The Government of Action lecture is another presentation I recently give. And I'm going to keep doing these slideshows. People like them. So there we go. Viking Dave says, great job. Great job. Well, great presentation. Well, thank you, Viking Dave. Always glad to be here for you. I appreciate everyone supporting with the super chats, and I'm glad the presentation. I hope it was inspiring to people. We just got to keep organizing and building. 1 in a million. Thank you for your super chat. Glad I could play the Hara song for you. I think Venceremos is also a Victor Hara song, so maybe I'll play that on another stream. The Venceremos song. I like that song. Venceremos, Venceremos. So there we go. You're one of my inspirations, Caleb. I've been watching your streams daily, and it's changed the way I see the world. I think that I found you by mere chance. Well, I'm really glad to hear that, Victor. I'm really glad. I hope that I can inspire you to assert your humanity and change the world around you. That's what I hope will be the case. Would you play the song "We Will Rise Again" from Far Cry 5? The same song where the song "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side" comes from. I don't think I will play that song. That's a little dark, right? "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side" I like "Oh John" also, which is from that video game, but a lot of the songs in that video game are a little bit dark. And honestly, that video game itself, I don't play video games. So I heard "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side" and how they made oh, Briggy, you're awesome. We're doing the best we can. Dare to struggle, dare to win. I made what is it called? "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side." I heard about that and how like the Bugaloo Boys had reclaimed it. Jimmy Dore got canceled for interviewing a Bugaloo Boy. God forbid. So I liked that song. I thought "Keep Your Rifle by Your Side" was a cool song. And so I looked into the video game. The video game is awful. It's awful. It's, the Waco incident, right? David Koresh, he did some bad stuff, but they didn't deserve to die. They didn't have to murder those people like they did. It was very much, they were making an example out of them. The whole thing was live on CNN and they murdered those people. But the video game Far Cry 5, based on like the videos I watched on the internet, I've never played it, but I watched like the video versions of the video game. It looks like it's giving the FBI version of events, right? Where he's a bad dude and all of that. Whoever they got to write the song wrote a very, very catchy song, Keep Your Rifle by Your Side. And Oh John is a good song too. Which apparently there is like a high school in like Denmark or the Netherlands that performed Oh John at their graduation. So maybe I'll play Oh John. I can't play the official version of it, but I'll play Oh John from the high school graduation. This is really wild. But yeah, it's a high school in Switzerland, right? It was a Swiss high school, and they performed Oh John at the graduation, which I just think is wild. I mean, of all the songs to play your high school graduation, you're going to play a song from a video game about Waco. But yeah, they performed Oh John at the high school graduation, and it was kind of ironic. The joke, supposedly the teacher didn't know that it was from a video game, and they just thought it was a religious song. They didn't realize it was written, for a video game. They thought it was just actually a Christian song about being religious. So I will put on Oh John. I'm not going to do the other song, but I will do Oh John. Oh John is a fun song. This is also from Far Cry, from the same video game that Keep Your Rifle by Your Side comes from. This is Oh John. So I will play Oh John. Here we go. This is Swiss high school kids at their graduation ceremony performing a song from a video game called Oh John. All right. Well, there we go. So we got another super chat. John says Tucker Carlson just posted a tweet mocking the claim that Iran is a threat to the United States. That is really good news. That's great news because a lot of hatred for Iran is widespread. This is what Tucker Carlson just posted. Fox News is wall-to-wall with dead-eyed politicians telling you that Iran is a dangerous sponsor of terror, softening up the base for a war. But what exactly does that phrase mean? How does it apply to the United States? How does it apply to the United States? Here's one measure. Over the past 20 years, how many Americans have been killed by Iran on American soil? Try to find that number and then compare it to the number of Americans killed by drug overdoses or suicide or illegal aliens or carjackings, diabetes, COVID vax. Still think Iran is the greatest threat? How about we focus on our own country for a minute? Well, that gets a retweet from me. That is an absolutely awesome tweet. And I hope that Donald Trump sees that. And I hope we don't have a war with Iran. And I hope the Zionists are unsuccessful in their efforts to incite Trump against Iran. Look, Iran is not trying to kill Trump. Ukraine tried to kill Trump. That's obvious. And Trump, Ryan Roth was a Ukrainiac. We don't know what the motivations of this other guy is. Apparently Trump is looking into it. But yeah, that's a really great tweet. Thank you for sharing that, John. And shout out, my hat off to you. I gave you a salute earlier. Good luck at the Uhuru convention. We support the Uhuru movement 100%. We are with them against the FBI. All right. Well, I'm going to put on the closing music, and then we will be out. We went well over 3 hours tonight. It's about 3:19 at the or 3:18 at the moment. So that's good. That's actually good. That's good. I'm doing some writing. I will be back. If not tomorrow night, I'll be back. I'll be back soon. So here we go. We're out. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.